Give me big old buckets of butter beer. Give me big old barrels of butter beer. Give me the drink I love so dear. And another round for my friend right here of the sweet old butter beer.
Welcome to the Three Broomsticks. We invite you to pull up a chair, grab a butterbeer, and settle in for a hearty discussion about Harry Potter. I'm Sierra Obermark.
I'm Sam Williams.
And I'm Aurelia Lieb. And today we're joined by the ghost host because unfortunately we don't have a guest for this episode because our desired guest is currently speaking at LeakyCon about this very topic. So, yeah, that worked out well for us scheduling-wise.
Welcome to Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington.
Exactly.
Today, for episode number 15, we've gathered to discuss a fandom crossover between Harry Potter and Percy Jackson and the Olympians by Rick Riordan. Warning! There are spoilers for Percy Jackson books 1, 2, 3, and also 4 and 5.
It'd be really awkward if we left out 3.
Yeah.
I just skipped it.
Yeah.
1, 2, 4, and 5. 3's fine, guys.
Is this his daughter? Who's that? I really see her at the end of 2. And then she's not really back in the series for a while.
Well, let us offer a toast to the comments on episode 12.
Woo!
Woohoo! This episode was Black Family, Death by Grimm, focused on the lineage and family tree and naming conventions of the Black family. We raise our glass to commenter Absent-Minded Raven, who said, Andromeda and Sirius show the difference between Slytherin and Gryffindor approaches to defying your family. One dramatically runs away, the other quietly courts and elopes with a Muggleborn.
I mean,
I thought that was very apt.
Yep, not wrong.
Yeah.
In some ways, I feel like Sirius is always the most true Gryffindor.
Dramatic.
Well, yeah, because of how much drama he puts into everything. Where I'm like, yeah, you know what? That feels right. James and Sirius were really Fred and George and Harry and Ron mixed together.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I mean, yeah, the whole I did my waiting, 12 years of it. So I'm just like, yeah, drama much? Seriously?
Yes.
He definitely can be a little melodramatic. And yeah, I mean, just even thinking about the fact that Andromeda is pretty quiet and, you know, just kind of went along with her normal life. Just I'm going to sneak off over here and bye. It's nice. I mean, it's it's the same result when it comes to the Black family, how they think about these people. But, it is definitely very different approaches in doing so. I would probably end up, if I ever did something anywhere close to these lines, I would probably fall on the side of Andromeda. Mm-hmm. Just okay, I'm just going to go over here. Okay, bye.
I mean, I have to say, we also don't know super much about the whole situation.
With Andromeda, yeah.
Yeah, so she may have done something spiteful or something, and we're just not aware, or we haven't been told at least. We even don't know that much about the Sirius situation. We know a little bit more. And again, I can only say Sirius is very much here for the drama, so dramatically definitely seems the correct description. And as a Gryffindor, I kind of see the drama point a little bit. Your family's there supposed to, you know, raise you and be there for you. So it is a really big offense if they're not doing that. So I can kind of get why he wanted to be dramatic about it.
I need an excerpt from when this happens so that we can see Sirius attempting to blow up the house as he leaves. But also, I feel so this is going to be a recurring segment throughout this episode of who wears it better, which is basically just who does it better. But like who in what's her name? Frid Wolfe, is that her name's Mrs. Black, Sirius's mother?
No.
Walburga?
Walburga. I was going to say Frid Wolfe is a giant, isn't it?
Yes, you were correct. That's Hagrid's mom. Walburga, I think is her name. So I'm going to go with it. And if I'm wrong, you'll just have to listen to a wrong name for a while. I wonder in Walburga's mind which burn is worse. Is it her son? Or is it the person who literally marries a muggle?
I think because Sirius is the firstborn son and direct lineage to her, it probably hurts more. Because I think there's a bit of a sons are better than daughters type thing happening in the Black family.
Yeah. I had not thought about the gendered, because of course I didn't. But
yeah.
Well, good for you.
My only thought was
taking the high road.
My only thought was that I don't know if it's the high road or just like I am a boy and so therefore didn't think about it.
The opposite of the high road.
Yeah. But my only connection with like maybe she took Andromeda's a little bit more is that Andromeda is like permanently making a muggle part of the family versus Sirius. There is a chance that he might come back. And I wonder if Walburga, throughout all of Sirius's rebelliousness, was just hoping that he'd come around eventually.
Probably. Yeah, I'd say probably. I've known enough parents of troubled children, we'll say, who, and I can say it takes a heck of a lot for them to ever get to the point of basically giving up.
Yeah.
Even if they're not, the best people or anything, if they care for their children, they're always, or they care for their family in general, they're always going to want, all of that to sync up. And so it takes a lot for someone to give up on their child not falling in. So, yeah, I'd say probably. I mean, you'd have to imagine that there's a reason. I mean, there's a reason all those posters in Sirius's room have permanent sticking charms on them because, he had to, I'm sure before he did that, she was going in and taking them all down. And it was probably a constant battle until he put those up there permanently. So, you have to imagine she was trying to bring him back.
Two thoughts. First, silly thought. Can you buy Hogwarts house themed merch somewhere? Like where is he getting those decorations? So that's a silly thought. I'm also considering in a world where Sirius doesn't spend 12 years of it in Azkaban, and let's entertain that he actually ends up with Lupin. How much of a problem would that be? Like a werewolf in the family?
Oh, interesting.
A huge one. I mean, I think huge.
I'm not even sure about homophobia because we don't really have any
indication. Yes,
right. We don't know one way or the other
if that's a thing or not. But considering we also don't really see any representation really aside from Dumbledore, it could be read as a thing. But even if it wasn't a thing, I think the werewolf part on its own would be huge enough of a big deal.
Yeah. Could you imagine? I mean, so many biases normally are married to each other, but it would be amazing for Walburga to be completely fine on her son being gay, but then wildly angry about it being a werewolf. It's just
that makes me think of there's an episode of that 70s show, and these two gay guys move in next door, and they get invited over to the foreman's house to watch a football game. It's football or baseball, and they come over to the house, and the dad Red hasn't figured out that they're gay for a while, and then he sees them kiss, and he's like, oh, and then he goes back out. And then basically is just totally fine with it. But then he notices that they're rooting for the other team. And he's like, you come into my house as fans of this. We were we were born this way. We were born there. Like, that's our team. And he's like, get out of my house. It's exactly what it made me think of. Just like, gay part, totally fine. But you dare root for the other team.
Remus seems like a nice fellow. I enjoy having him over at the house. And like the 15th time, she's like, what potion do you have with you tonight? He's like, oh yeah, I've got the Wolfsbane potion. Get out of my... Oh, man. So I have a quick question about permanent sticking charms. They must be incredibly inconvenient. And, like, there has to be a jinx for them, right? Or else, like, I feel like Hogwarts would just be plastered in permanent sticked stuff all the time. Unless, Hogwarts probably has an anti-permanent sticking charm. But, like... How are Fred and George and Harry not just going into the Ministry at all hours during books 5, 6, and just plastering like anti-Ministry propaganda throughout the entire place? Like, if the permanent sticking charm works that well, where like they can't even remove Mrs. Black, which, by the way, can't they just take out a chunk of the wall and have the wall rebuild itself? Like, that, anyways.
That was my thought.
Just take down the wall.
That's a really good point, because... especially thinking book 5, where Umbridge comes up with all of these new school rules, you could just see people being like, "Nah, let's just put the equivalent of Potter's things for Umbridge up everywhere, and she can't do anything because it's permanent." But
right, like how is somebody not plastering something to her face? Or the back of her head that says, kick me. Like, I just don't understand how people aren't using permanent sticking charms all the time if there's no counter curse to them.
That's a good point.
Maybe it's similar to, like, permanent marker, where they are hard to get off, but they're not impossible to eventually get off. So maybe there is some sort of solution. But then considering Dumbledore walks in and out of that house, he would surely know the solution for it. So.
And you would think that Sirius would too then, especially after a year of living with his mother. And Molly certainly spends her whole summer trying to make the Order's headquarters livable. So it makes me wonder if Sirius just secretly loves having Wahlberger around for some company.
Well, isn't there something that says... maybe Creature keeps redoing the permanent sticking charm.
Oh, maybe
so maybe it does wear off after a
magic.
while, but he's reattaching it, or I don't know how much. I always assumed, I think the very first time that I read it, I assumed that his mother was from her portrait somehow continuing to stick herself to the wall.
Oh my gosh. if portraits can produce magic, that would be insane. I would never sleep well at all in Hogwarts. Can you imagine Sir Cadogan, actually about a cadavering a child at one point?
Well, he can't even sword fight. So.
Yeah.
Could you imagine, though, that the Blacks used the house elf magic to get around certain things? But still, we're rooting for Voldemort, and Voldemort ultimately didn't realize that it was part of his downfall, that he was like, it's just a house elf, who cares?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I also wonder if Creature might just be using, Muggle means to keep it stuck, and, they're all wizards, so they don't... So he's, just, chewing gum and sticking it behind, being like, they'll never figure this out.
He's got Gorilla Glue.
Yeah. Finally sees a gorilla in the wild. It's amazing that when you melt these things down, they create such a sticky substance.
Oh, God.
Or, was it staple guns and stuff like that?
Uh-huh.
Oh, God.
Creature is apparating into some of the gorilla sanctuaries along the African continent and just, murdering them to create glue.
Oh, my God.
Why isn't this working?
No.
Okay, this got really dark.
This got so dark and so off topic.
All right, let's go to the main discussion. A much younger book that has nothing to do with murdering gorillas.
As far as we know.
And we really, I might really not know because book 5 is a total blur. I finished it 5 hours ago in the wee hours of 4 a.m.
I have to do the maths, but I think like 19 hours for me.
Yeah, nice. Did any of us read it properly, like, while the books were coming out?
I read 2 of them. I talk about that in my little
we have a water knowledge experience. Fine. Well done, Sierra. Good job. Aurelia, take it away.
Right. So I figured there may be some listeners who were like, I haven't read it, so maybe it'd be good to, even though we're going to spoil everything, give you a very brief introduction of what it is, and maybe after listening to either the introduction or the full episode, you want to read it. So Percy Jackson and the Olympians is a series of 5 fantasy novels written by American author Rick Riordan, which he pronounces his own last name wrong. Just putting it out there. Because I think the Irish pronunciation is Riordan, but like he lives in Texas, so whatever. And it's the first book series of the Camp Half-Blood Chronicles. So there's like multiple book series, but we're only talking about the Percy Jackson series today. So it's the books 1 to 5. These books are set in a world with Greek gods in the 21st century, and they follow the protagonist Percy Jackson, if you haven't guessed, who's a young demigod who must prevent the Titans, led by Kronos, from destroying the world. And the Percy Jackson books use prophecy heavily as a way to move the plot along. So every book has at least one prophecy within the book, and then there's one for the whole overarching series. So yeah, as Sam's already said, I thought it'd be fun to put how, our experience with the series and how long we've been in the fandom. So Sam and I are newbies.
So new.
For different reasons. But
they haven't let me come home from the hospital yet. I'm so new.
Yeah. So yeah, I only started reading them, I think I started last year or maybe the year before, because Mike from formerly Potterless, and now he's doing the newest Olympian, announced that he was doing Percy Jackson next. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll give them a try. And I have to say, because I was listening to him while he was doing it, so I was sort of only reading the book when he moved to the next book. So I think I enjoyed it more because I was listening to him as he went through it, because he's like very enthusiastic about the series, whereas, I like him in my 30s, and I'm like, okay, this book is for 12-year-olds. A lot of the stuff is very easy to guess. If you're in your 30s, you're not the target audience. But I think because he's so enthusiastic about it and the characters, I've enjoyed it probably a bit more if I hadn't just went and read it myself.
Yeah, my brother read the whole series multiple times when he was in middle school and high school. And I read, I think, the first 2 around then, maybe a little bit before the first movie came out. But then I got kind of distracted by everything else that I was reading. And I ended up coming back to the series as an adult. I was working at Barnes & Noble, and I read The Olympians, Heroes of Olympus, Trials of Apollo, the Magnus Chase series. Magnus Chase and Trials of Apollo were coming out while I was working there. So nice. It was like 2015 was when the first Magnus Chase was released. And so I was like, oh, this is by the same author. Oh, it's Norse mythology. That's super cool. And so I bought it and I put it on my shelf, and I was like, I will get to you. And then I proceeded to read the preceding 10 books and just stared at the Magnus Chase book going, I will one day. The Magnus Chase one was kind of like me getting into it, and then it caused me to read everything else because I wanted to know how it was all tied in. And then read the Trials of Apollo series, because Magnus Chase and Trials of Apollo were releasing concurrently.
Nice.
And then the only part of all the tie-ins that I haven't read is the Kane Chronicles. They are on my bookshelf. I do have them. But I'm generally more interested in Greek, Roman, Norse mythology than Egyptian mythology. And that's really the only reason. And because I was getting really attached to all the characters in the existing books. And so I was like, I don't want to go and read a book about other people, even if I know they're going to tie into Percy and crew anyway. So, but yeah, I guess since 2015 has been my real fandom inclusion. And I've read them a few times, and yeah, that's my story.
So that makes you the expert.
Yes. I guess so. And I thought I was going to be real rusty. So this is going to be fun.
Everyone should, all our listeners should definitely check the comments in the preceding days after this episode comes out, because Irvin, who's not here, is an actual expert on Percy Jackson. And I'm sure we'll have many things to say. Essays, one might think. So keep checking the comments and see what Irvin has to say about this episode. I'm going to take us all back to a faraway time called 2022, where I first started reading Percy Jackson. So I had just moved up from teaching freshmen to sophomores, and I was helping to coach the new, brand new teacher, first year solo teaching, freshman, all that jazz. And she decided to teach Percy Jackson. And so because I was helping to coach her through it, I was like, I should probably read this book in order for me to understand it. So I read the book and I was like, cool. But the reason why I missed it is that I have a penchant to not read things when people go, oh my gosh, it's just like Harry Potter. Because I am snooty.
I for some reason thought the sentence would end with, this is super popular, you should read it. Yeah. I was like, but how did you end up in Harry Potter?
I ended up in the Harry Potter fandom before it got popular. I was one of those kids. I'm like,
oh my gosh.
Anyways, I'm super cool, super fly. Yeah, I guess like when Percy Jackson first started coming out, a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, it's just like Harry Potter. It's like the real world, but the monsters. And I was like, cool, I love Greek myths, but I will not touch anything that people are like, it's just like Potter, because nothing can be like Potter. In fact, that's like one of the reasons why I didn't read the Baudelaire children's, what's it called? Oh my gosh.
Lemony
Snicket series. A series of unfortunate events. Because my good cousin was like, hey, you should absolutely read this. It's way better than Potter. But she was a contrarian and she was wrong. Ooh. And she admitted it like 2 years ago. We had a conversation about it 2 years ago, and she was like, wait, I told you what? No, I'm clearly wrong. Good. So we'll have a little bit of a face-off at the end of which one's better, Percy Jackson or Harry Potter. And you might not be surprised by what I say.
Considering you are currently listening to a Harry Potter podcast, you may or may not be surprised at the answers.
Sweet. Also, Aurelia, thank you for the very British spelling of favorite as we move on into this next section.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No apologies.
I used to make much more of an effort to spell things American in like American projects, like this podcast. But all my, like, honestly, you guys are like, ooh, British spelling, interesting. Versus my British colleagues, when I do the opposite, are like, oh my God, this is American. This isn't English. Fix it now. And I'm just like, okay. Calm down. It's still English. They're like, no, it's not. I was like, okay.
That's really funny. I go back and forth because I used to work for a British company, and like half of my coworkers were British. And so I adopted a lot of weird spelling, like in one paragraph I could have both spellings and things like that. So sometimes when I go to edit, I type it and it underlines it and I'm like, why is it wrong? I'm so confused. Like the what word was it I spelled, and you guys spell it with an S and we spell it with a Z? Anyway.
Oh, all of them.
All of the, yeah, anything that's a Z, you guys say zebra, not zebra. So, it's a thing.
Yeah.
I also did that when I lived in Ireland for a summer. I came back doing a lot of British spellings of things, or I guess Irish spellings of things. I don't want to insult the people of Southern Ireland.
Yeah, don't you dare.
Oh, yeah.
I've done enough of that on many previous podcasts. Not insulting the Irish specifically, but everyone.
Yeah, by like episode 20, you're gonna have alienated 99% of all people.
All continents except for Antarctica. I love me some penguins.
Oh, now all the people in Antarctica that aren't penguins will be upset. But there's just no way to get it right.
Speaking of our favorite or not favorite people,
yes,
who was your favorite character in Percy Jackson?
So, I mean, we've already discovered that I definitely have main character syndrome. So I was like, oh, Percy, because Harry is also definitely at the top of my list. But I actually really like Grover. And I think part of it is because unlike Ron, for example, who gets a bit shunted later as the series develops, I think Grover actually gets to become his own goat person, I guess. So I actually really like that, that he starts out as the, hey, I'm going to tell you everything about this world because you are new and know nothing, Percy, to he just goes off on his own adventures and he does his own thing and he meets up with Percy, but he's also like very much important to, the wild and the nature world that he's much more part of than the demigod world.
So it's interesting. So, Aurelia, for full transparency, Grover is one of my least favorite characters.
Okay.
And he's like way not even near my favorite satyr. Thank you to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe for that.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
I was going to say, really? Which other satyr do we meet in the Percy Jackson series?
No. Broaden your mind, Aurelia. There are other satyr stories out there. Like one other. I can't name any other satyrs than Mr. Tumnus. Whose acting portrayal by the Scotsman who plays Professor X.
Yeah, I know who you mean.
In the original ones. Oh my gosh, what is his name? Sierra, help me.
I had it in my head until you said, Sierra, help me. And now it's gone. You ruined it.
Oh my gosh. What is his name?
Help, sir.
James McAvoy.
Thank you, James McAvoy.
Wait, what? I thought you said in the original ones.
No. I said in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Oh.
The movie.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes,
James McAvoy. James McAvoy's acting portrayal when luring the little girl to sleep is like one of my favorite scenes of my adolescence of growing up. Anyways, not that I'm a super creep about luring people to sleep. I think it's a cool scene and good music. I was all here for Grover's story arc. I was like, all right, cool. We got sort of a bumbling idiot who's like going to get increasingly better and better and better. And I was like, I'm here for the thing with Pan and everything. It all fell apart for me when like his power of having lots of Pan inside of him is to cause a panic. And that, I just was like, what is it? Why would the nature god? It's just that it's the name of the god? No! And so it was sort of out on Grover ever since.
But then, actually, he does it only once, really.
Mm-hmm. That's another problem. And then, throughout the entire fifth book, I'm like, where is the panic?
I mean,
why aren't you using this?
Yeah, I mean, I think my one part about that is just that he didn't seem to use it very often, but I mean, that is the mythological origin of panic is.
No, I know, but
yeah, I was going to say
you can't really fault
like
them
you
for
have
following the mythology.
I'm not following. I mean, they don't follow the mythology. Don't have an issue
with Grover, but with the myth.
They don't follow the mythology and lots of other things. They could have made Panic a little bit better. My point is that I felt like there was not enough explanation into what is for young adult readers, like a very young adult reader, into explaining why Panic and Pan were coordinated together. And so it's just sort of like, and now I have a panic ability. I'm like, oh, can we have the Tale of Three Brothers here for a second to explain like why? No, okay, great, that's fine.
Fair enough.
So, who's your favorite character then, Sam?
I have a proclivity to choose really cool women as my favorite characters. So, like, I love Ginny, I love Luna, I love McGonagall, I love Dolores Umbridge. I'm kidding. But so I go with either Annabeth or Thalia.
Yeah,
and both of them have massive flaws. Like, I don't. This is like the thing with Sirius, right? A lot of people are like, "Oh, but Sirius does blah 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 blah." When I'm like, Sirius is my favorite character. He's like, he shouldn't have been fighting. He should have been in therapy. And I'm like, no, 100%. He should have been in therapy. He's my favorite character, not my favorite person.
I was gonna say, but name a character that is flawless.
Yeah.
Name a character who should not be in therapy.
Grover.
That's also a good question.
Grover absolutely.
Considering all of the craziness that any fantasy character experiences on a daily basis,
yeah,
they should all be in therapy.
Yeah, seriously. None more so than Aphrodite.
Aphrodite, the goddess of love.
What? So, yeah, Annabeth or Thalia, I think both of them have these cool abilities to see through some of the stupidity that Percy's showing. I like some of the commands that they take, and I will say justice for Thalia that she doesn't get to be part of the ending battle against Prometheus. But, yeah, either of those two I really like. I'll also shout out to Luke, who had, I thought, some of the only thoughtful ideas out of any male character, with Grover being an exception, or Chiron, but like, everyone's so caught up in like, hey, they're the gods, like, they're family, like, we're gonna support them, and it's like,
yeah,
hey, they're gods in control of, I guess, Western society, and there's a lot of problems. So I'm on Luke's side here. I mean, I'm not on Prometheus' side.
I was going to say, okay, next question. Favorite god?
So just sitting there sort of being like, hey, Luke's totally right when he's like, the gods fight and we all get caught up in it. Like, we should tear down this system. And so suddenly I'm like, ooh, is this going in a golden compass route? Are we going with like, kill all the gods? That's amazing. That sounds, oh, no, he is the villain. And we're just keeping up a system that is terrible for everyone. That sounds fun.
Well, they're building new cabins, so that's
I mean, I will say, I mean, in the other books, you get obviously more depth. Because it continues the story, but yeah. But anyway, we're not talking about this.
No, we're not. We're talking about the depthless books that are Percy Jackson 1 through 5.
Yes. Yeah, my favorite character, I usually do not have main character syndrome. I actually usually find main characters in books, especially if they're from the first person, I usually find them very annoying. And I often don't like main characters. This is an exception for me because the sass and the sarcasm of Percy really wins me over every time. Even though he, can be a dumb kid who does very reckless, crazy things, and doesn't think through situations, you add in that sass and that sarcasm and I come back. I just appreciate the outlook that he has on things in general. There isn't a greater example, I think, than the chapter titles. Those kill me every time. I just laugh hysterically every time I get to a new chapter title.
I become Lord of the Bathroom.
Exactly. They're just so great. So, yeah, Percy is my favorite. And then I think Chiron's my second favorite. He gives me Ferenz vibes that I'm like all here for. I know the obvious centaur-ism being very obvious in that comparison, but also just kind of the calm, wise. I know things that I probably shouldn't know, and I may or may not tell you about them, which also brings in Dumbledore vibes, but we'll get to that.
You mean Mars is bright tonight?
He didn't. Mars is bright tonight. That was.
I know. I'm just.
But yes, but exactly.
He does in my fanfic for sure. Given the fact that Ares, aka Mars, is actually in it, they hook up for sure.
Yeah.
I was absolutely convinced here that Chiron was the spy for the camp, especially throughout book 4. I was like, he knows all this information about Percy. He seems to be passing all of that along. His dad is the Titan Prometheus. Like, maybe he really wants to get him back. And then I was too clever for the book series. We have no major clues about whatever her name is.
Serena Beauregard.
Wait, is her last name really Beauregard?
Yeah.
There's a crossover. This is the long lost sister of the Beauregards of a series of unfortunate events. Lovely. Now we have to do a crossover episode about those two and just completely divert from Harry Potter. Yeah, I thought Chiron was the spy, and I was highly disappointed. I really wanted him to have a very General Hux from Rise of Skywalker moment when he's like, I'm the spy.
I thought it was Clarice until obviously she isn't in New York City or in Manhattan, and they figure out the spy is still like with them. So it's like, I can't
be Clarice. Dang it. Yeah, daughter
but then
of Ares.
At that point, it couldn't be Chiron either because Chiron wasn't there.
True.
Or was he in spirit?
He's always there in spirit. But like. I know I just sort of said it as a joke, but do you guys have a favorite god?
I was always a big Apollo fan because I loved Greek mythology like a ton. It was like once I got exposed to it, like if I was a 5-year-old, we had like these little 4 or 5-year-old and 6-year-old kid books, and I would just devour them. And then I read tons of different Greek mythology theories. It's actually really weird that I didn't read Percy Jackson, but I was always a big fan of Apollo being the sun god who brought light and stuff, and I was really into archery when the Lord of the Rings movies came out because Legolas was my favorite character. We almost named my dachshund Legolas until we realized that sounded like he didn't have any legs, and dachshunds obviously have very little legs.
But that's a great pun.
I know. Maybe someday. And I took up archery, and I found like that was one of my only areas that I felt really successful in athletics, and I was fairly good at it for a long time. And so I loved Apollo with the bow and arrow and the chariot and everything. I did not like his portrayal in Percy Jackson, but that has always been my favorite god. The god that I actually like in the Percy Jackson series is Hermes, because he actually seems to show some care for Luke throughout parts of the book.
Yeah. So mine would be Artemis.
Oh, yeah.
Super, super biased because I'm aromantic and asexual, and she's very much sort of a representation of that. Yeah. Where she's like, nope. No love and romance for me. We're just figuring shit out. And also because she is actually on, like, she seems more down to earth. Like, as in she's actually on, the world and moving around and helping hunting monsters down and stuff. Versus all her siblings are like, no, we're on Olympus. We don't care. or the sea, I guess. Or the underworld.
Yeah. My favorite god is in Greek mythology. It's always been Hades.
Yeah.
I don't know what that says about me.
I think it says that you like James Woods.
Honestly, though, yes.
Maybe not the person, but
yeah, I've always been a fan of Hades. I'm always drawn to like the dark but slightly misunderstood, but there's potentially redeemable things, and in usually, I mean, in most portrayals and the original mythology, like, Hades doesn't choose to be there. Zeus sends him to be ruler of the underworld, partially as punishment, partially as like a fake gift. You get to rule over your own area. Haha. But
they're all dead.
But yeah, exactly. So, and then I like his whole thing with Persephone, and
yeah, it's a great myth.
That's always interesting. obviously that has been, overly romanticized in other things. Thank you, Lore Olympus, which if you are a graphic novel fan, highly recommend. I've always liked Hades. Obviously in Percy Jackson, they portray the gods at least in slightly different ways. And I will say, while I did still like Hades as a character in Percy Jackson, I do agree. I think Hermes is my favorite. Plus, Nathan Fillion, if you're going to go movie version. So
does Nathan Fillion play Hermes?
He sure does. I will get into that later, but he sure does play Hermes. Yeah. It's pretty dope.
I have to say, I really liked the Hades from Hades, the video game.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah. Their whole interaction between Zacharias and Hades, so good. There's a whole level of sass happening constantly.
Yeah. See, maybe that's it. It's the level of sass. You just feel like it's like I'm drawn to characters with sass.
I will also say Hades, also from Hades Town, the musical, is one of the best musical parts out there, I feel, especially because he's one of the only bass singers, so I can actually sing the parts. You were saying, Sierra.
Oh, I was saying that I do agree with your comments on Luke, though. He is a very compelling character because he does have a lot of valid valid points and concerns. And, it's like you're kind of choosing the wrong side or the wrong way to do this, bud, but I like your spirit. It's like, what's that meme? Like, he's a little confused, but he's got the spirit.
Yeah. Like, great intentions, wrong impact for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And it's definitely one of those where Cronus as a villain isn't super interesting, but because he basically compels Luke and then takes over Luke's body is what makes it interesting.
Right.
I definitely have said Prometheus when I mean Kronos. So just, for the audience, know that I mean Kronos, and I will probably say Prometheus a bunch more. I read books 3, 4, and 5 yesterday. It's
slightly confusing because Prometheus is actually in the series.
I know, I'm sorry. It's all a blur. Yesterday was quite a day of Percy Jackson. I will say also that the very classic Hades logic in book 5, where he's like, oh, no. I'm going to wait out the whole battle with the Titans and then I'm going to sneak in. Like, essentially, like the beta fish technique. I was like, that's classic Hades. That's a super satisfying read. Like, I really like that they brought this in. This is nice. And also, Nico being son of Hades was a really cool twist to things, and I thought brought out some really awesome, almost gothic elements where he's commanding the dead and stuff. And I was here for that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'm not 100% sure, but I think Nico is in some of the other books.
He better be. He's cool.
The Rick Riordan verse. So, yeah.
He is, and he has, I think it's a series of shorts or something it's specifically about him as well.
Yeah. That's definitely cool. I'm definitely still interested in reading some of the other books.
Yeah, they're great.
Even though I'm more than double the age of the target audience, but
I will say there is kind of similar to Harry Potter. They do grow a little bit, but in the difference being, instead of it growing through the original series, it grows through the subsequent series. So I feel like each subsequent set of 3 or 5 books gets a little bit older. By the time you get to, I would argue Magnus Chase and Trials of Apollo are closer to are not quite middle grade anymore. I would even push them slightly towards the lower end of YA.
Yeah.
So, they do throughout the entire universe of the Olympians and the mythology, it does grow a little bit. So you may not feel as distant from it reading the subsequent series.
That sounds cool. shall we dive into the similarities between...
Let's do it.
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. So I think the most obvious one is it's a series that follows a young boy, so either Harry or Percy, who... I don't super remember how old Percy is at
He's
the very
12.
beginning.
12,
So yeah,
so
I was
middle
going to say, I
school.
think he may be 12, yeah. So Harry is obviously 10, turning 11, and Percy is 12. When the book starts, neither of them have any clue of their powers and are then basically starting to learn, train, go to a school, go to a camp to get their skills.
Yeah. They also have the same fatal flaw. They're saving people thing.
Yeah. They're the main character.
Yeah, exactly.
They also both only have really 2 moves. Like, Harry's got Expelliarmus and Expecto Patronum, and Percy is like bad sword fighting. Like, we're in first person. We should have some information about like footwork and not just I dodged and then I slashed. So I'm gonna say that he's a bad sword fighter. And then he's got like some ocean summoning that is akin to Batman's very convenient belt, where it's like, and now I can control seawater in Texas. Woo! So, yeah, they have 2 moves. I will say, who wears it better? Who's the better protagonist, Harry Potter or Percy Jackson?
Yeah. And I think because the ocean power is a bit of the utility belt, as you compared it, the ocean power does more than, Expelliarmus and Expecto Patronum, because they still do just very specific things. So I think it's more handy to have ocean powers, because you can become the Lord of the Bathroom as well as, visit your father in your palace under the sea. So, there's just more things to do.
Yeah, that's a good point. Still, I'm going to give it to Harry. I like his 2 moves.
The Patronum gives you a stag.
A really cool stag. A really cool stag. I'm going to give it to Harry for no reason other than I just like Harry better. And I think where it doesn't mean much for Ginny, his 2 moves are effective.
They are, yeah. They also identify him. But...
That's true.
I would also, because ocean summoning doesn't identify Percy.
I mean, to be fair, everyone always knows who Percy is before Percy knows who anyone is.
This is true.
They're always like, Perseus Jackson. He's like, who are you?
What are they doing? Passing around photos? Hey, this guy's son of Poseidon. This guy's son of Poseidon. Like, how are they all getting this information?
Yeah.
They look at him and he looks like Poseidon. I don't know. That's what I've got.
That'd be so funny. Hey, Percy, stop wearing surfer-related outfits.
Percy always wears stuff with a trident on it and just has Poseidon merch on him.
Got a big forehead tattoo.
Online shop.
Son of P.
Another similarity, their fate is determined by a prophecy, or determined in quotes, I guess. And it's also interesting because a prophecy, not only is their fate determined by a prophecy, but it's a prophecy that could also refer to somebody else. So, Neville, and then any of the other sons or daughters of the big 3, Zeus, Poseidon, or Hades. So yeah, it creates this huge decision for them. It also portends their death, which is a lot to deal with as a 15, 16-year-old hearing a prophecy about how you could potentially die. So that's also kind of interesting, just dealing with prophecy, which we will get more into.
But who wears it better, Sierra? Who deals with hearing about the prophecy better, Harry or Percy?
I think we need to keep in mind that Percy knows part of the prophecy, from the beginning, whereas Harry asks about it and Dumbledore's like, no, you're too young, I'm not telling you. So then when Harry finally finds out, he's trashing Dumbledore's office, which is still up there in my favorite moments in the Harry Potter series, because I'm just like, I'm so sad we didn't see that in the movies, because it would have been so fun.
They could have done it in the post credits.
Yeah, I'm sure Daniel Radcliffe was a little let down. He's like, I don't get to throw stuff? Dang it.
Shoot. That's so funny.
But probably all the props guys were like, "Oh, we're not doing that. Good."
Oh, I don't know.
To produce 20 versions of the same thing, so you can break it and break it and break it, and set design between scenes.
Yeah. Other similarities in just the general story. It's about a trio. There's a main character boy, and his closest friends are a boy and a girl. Other character conventions, there's, wise fatherly figure. There's a classic villain who's kind of unseen for a while. There's rivals, people who you think are friends and then they're not. All of those things, but that's kind of just a general staple of storytelling and fantasy in general, so makes sense. They go to training at specialized, schools, I guess, to fight a foe larger than themselves at a very young age.
But wait, who wears it better? A summer camp or Hogwarts, the school of witchcraft and wizardry? Because I would say Camp Half-Blood really feels more like the camp of adolescence and bitchery.
I have to say, the part of that annoys me about the Percy Jackson series the most is like, it's been a year. It's another summer. It's like, we're just skipping over 10 months of the year. Whereas in Harry Potter, we're almost doing the opposite, where we really closely follow Harry for most of the year. We get glimpses of the summer, but then mostly we are at school. And I know school holidays in America are longer, like during the summer, so they potentially get quite a long time at camp. But still, like, it's only really once a year, because surely your winter holidays aren't super long. So
no, they're like a week or 2 or 3. People don't normally get 3. Like, it's either a week or 2, and then it's a week, in October or February, April. But like, it is a great point. Like, Percy, no wonder Kronos, that's the one, yes. No wonder Kronos is somewhat already back together. You've spent 9 months away from this place.
Yeah. He's like, so I was just a normal person hanging out with Rachel. I was like, okay. And everyone else is like fighting. And then he like goes to see his dad. He's like, why do you look so old? Yeah. And he's like, we've been fighting for a year. Glad you had a relaxing time.
I too would be annoyed at Percy every time he came back to camp. Hey man,
right.
I like 2 of my best friends just died yesterday. Where have you been? I got expelled again.
Although the other half of it is that, maybe people are annoyed that Harry keeps coming back to school because they're like, dang it, he's here again. That means Voldemort's going to try to come get him again.
God, the end of the year is going to be murderous.
Education.
I just want to learn. I just want to get out of here.
All Ravenclaw Tower has permanent sticking charms of Potter stinks from Goblet of Fire.
They practice all of their dueling stuff on like a puppet of Harry.
Is voodoo a thing in Hogwarts? Because that feels like maybe that's why Harry is so angry all the time.
Each book has a quest, and all 5 or 7 books, dependent, are part of a larger kind of quest. And then a small note is that in the first book of each one, they have to get past a 3-headed dog.
Who wears it better? Cool. Which dog does it better?
Because that's the OG. That's real Cerberus.
Yeah, that's true.
Fluffy. Yeah.
Fine.
That's the OG.
Also, I really want to know...
Fluffy has the better name, though.
That's true. I really want to know if Cerberus in Percy Jackson is the same proportionally sized as it is in Hercules, the animated Disney movie in the 90s. Because they made that dog so huge. If you go back and watch that, like, it takes Hercules 2 seconds to stranglehold him, but... Goodness gracious! Like, if that's what Percy Jackson is facing down, I will give it to him.
I mean, I'm stealing this directly from Mike, but like he's pointed out, I think his wife pointed out that Mrs. O'Leary seems to have conveniently different sizes every time Percy describes how big she is. I was like, well, last time she was the size of a Hummer, now she's the size of a garbage truck. Those are like quite
Those are
different in size,
very different.
so-
Somehow she's the size of a mouse and crawling through the mouse there. Like, that's kind of weird.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wouldn't trust Percy with describing sizes, is what I'm saying, because I think he's not very good at it.
I'm done.
And then I think
I need a minute.
We've murdered Sierra.
Sam and I just talking trash and Sarah's just dying.
Sorry, I'm like crying right now. Okay, I'm good.
Are you sure? You good? You over the
I'm
dog
good. This is a
sizing thing?
podcast for all ages. I'm fine.
What tickled your gullet there, Sierra? You want to explain it to the listeners?
I'm sorry. No, I don't want to explain it.
The last one I have for similarities is really something that happens mostly in Half-Blood Prince and Deathly Hallows, and for Percy Jackson happens in The Last Olympian, is that there is very, very much impressed on them from outsiders or like other people. So it was like, you need to understand the past of the person you're fighting. The only difference is that, you know, while Tom Riddle and Lord Voldemort look very differently, they're still the same person. But Percy has to learn about Luke, who technically isn't the big evil guy because that's still Kronos, but there's nothing to learn about Kronos other than he's evil. So Percy needs to understand Luke's past and what made Luke want to stand up against the system, as we've already mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Who wears it better, Voldemort or Lukey Kronos?
There's so much more to learn about Voldemort, so
Yeah.
I think
Cool.
that's fairly
Settled.
easy.
Easy.
Right, differences. So we've already touched upon this, so we don't have to go into super much detail, but Percy Jackson is for a younger audience. So it's marketed as a middle grade book, and Harry Potter is YA minus maybe the first two books, but they definitely get pretty dark and yeah. You know, if you read the first Harry Potter book and you're just like, and it was Christmas, and like next chapter it is March, and you're just like, what why?
Yeah.
What? And then you read Order of the Phoenix and it's like 5 chapters in, we're still in like the same week.
Yeah. It's
like,
still
yeah.
Christmas. Sirius is still happy. Next chapter. Okay, it's right after Christmas, and Sirius is absolutely aghast with deadly intent of himself. Yeah. I was wondering how we all felt about the writing on a sentence level with Percy Jackson. I must admit, like, I obviously know that I'm not the target audience, but I still got pretty tired of like being in first person where we're getting Percy's like very hand it to you, this is what's going on with this other character thoughts, where he like is super introspective about like, she's feeling this way, which is why she said it like this, and then immediately clueless as to why she's acting like that, even though he's just handed the readers that information. So I thought it was pretty inconsistent from a writing standpoint. I like the overarching stories, I think, were fine, obviously. Like, they're very successful, and it's fun to get into Greek mythology. But I got pretty tired of the prose.
Yeah, I genuinely not a fan of first person. Yeah. As you said, I think it just feels clunky to read. Like, I can get used to it I mean, there's other upsides to it with, you know, the chapter titles, and every chapter is like, so this and this. And it's like, it just draws you in. But then I'm just like, it's still weird to read like that. But I think I just genuinely haven't read that many books in first person, because I think majority of books are not in first person.
True.
Yeah, the first person doesn't bother me, I think, as much as it bothers you guys. But I think on a sentence level, it is a little, I will agree with the clunkiness, but I think that's more just because it's targeted and things need to be a little bit more explicit when younger readers are expected to understand what's going on. So I kind of chalk it up to that. But yeah, it can get a little like, okay, move forward.
Yeah, I don't know. I think between Riordan and Rowling, between the two R's, as one might say, I enjoy Rowling's hesitancy to be too explicit, even in the first two books. Although, I mean, obviously, like, the opening line of Sorcerer's Stone is as explicit and as you can possibly get in terms of, like, the Dursleys are normal. But I feel like...
But set in many more words than that.
Yeah. I just feel like having it being in first person with a 15-year-old and, like, trying to have the mindset of a 15-year-old while also trying to tell a story is a really hard thing to do. And I don't know that it was nailed down at the sentence level for me.
Yeah. But then I think there's almost a counterpoint to be made where I think sometimes the certain characters in the Harry Potter world are too adult.
Yes, I agree.
Or come across as too adult. So I think there's sort of both of them show why, you know, like, I think it's definitely easier for me as a 30-year-old to read Harry Potter again because it is more grown-up-y.
Yeah. Especially 5 on.
There's so, yeah. And there's, you know, so many, like, really, really adult themes throughout it. And, like, you can just clearly discuss again and again and again because we have a podcast about it. And just dive into theories and stuff. But then I'm sometimes like, I remember how I was as a 14, 15, 16-year-old. And I wasn't, like, super immature, but, like, I was definitely not that mature either.
Yeah.
So it's like, sometimes I'm just like, okay. I also think that J.K. Rowling in general is better at writing mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think she's fairly good at it. I would potentially do a minus Barty Crouch Jr. because the reveal of that is the character you thought is dead isn't dead. So that's, you know, not really fair for the audience to guess because it's like, we told you he's dead. Guess what? He's not.
Yeah. And then the movie goes and ruins it by making it way too obvious.
Yeah. With David Tennant's
little tongue and then Alastor Moody being like,
yeah.
Who am I?
So, but I do think that also we can, with Harry Potter especially, we see how much J.K. Rowling grows as a writer throughout the series. Like, not to say that the first books were not good, but like compare that to book 7. Like, she's definitely gotten way better as a writer. I
also I agree. I think like books 1 and 2, you can compare more to Percy Jackson's 1 through 5 because it seems like they're fairly ish around the same target audience, and then she sort of starts to be like, well, this is still a story for kids, but I want everyone to be able to read it. Sort of book 4 on. Yeah.
The only thing I think that's to be said for the way that Percy Jackson is written, that those whole like wall breaking moments are pretty funny. But if they weren't there, you know, you wouldn't technically, like, if you retold the story in third person, you could still successfully tell the story, I think.
I agree. I wonder what Harry Potter in first person would look like.
Oh gosh.
Oh my god.
A lot more caps lock Harry, that's for sure.
I think in a way it could also be a lot darker, especially like, I'm locked in a cupboard.
Yeah.
I'm 8. It's like, what?
There's 6 spiders on my face this morning.
They haven't been giving me food for a while.
Also, I think book 6 would be engorged with some rather raunchy Harry thoughts.
Oh, there's already too many.
Yeah.
It's like the whole monster in his belly description. Ooh, stop.
Can you imagine first person Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince from Ron's perspective?
Oh gosh.
Just 70 chapters of what Lavender Brown's body looks like. My goodness.
Yeah.
Moving on. I think also what is different is that we've already said the books get darker in Harry Potter, but also it feels like you grow up with the characters, especially if, you know, like our age, we grew up as the books came out, so we literally grew up with the books. But with Percy Jackson, it doesn't feel as much. Like, he's 12 at the beginning and he's like 15, 16 in the final book. but it's still very much written the same way. It's like, I don't feel like there's as much of a growing up happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the Percy is more of a Percy Potter. Oh, Percy Potter. My goodness. Percy Potter and Harry Jackson. That sounds like a euphemism. Anyways, Percy Potter. Oh my God, I can't stop. Sierra, it's your turn. Here you go.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree. There's a darker tone throughout the later Harry Potter books. You do grow with the characters with Percy. I think maybe it's just because you only see them, you know, quote, quote, on summer vacation. So you don't get to spend quite as much time like learning and growing with them, and they get launched into an adventure immediately. It's not really, you don't get kind of the day-to-day life. And so, you know, I definitely think that probably lends itself to why you kind of feel this way. You just don't have kind of as much of their everyday experience, and that's oftentimes what causes people to grow. So, you know, because you don't see any of that, it doesn't really feel like they change quite as much. But I think that they do grow, and if you don't binge read them all in one day, you can kind of like come back to it and be, I mean, I binged them, and that's the only, but not 3 books in a day. That's insane. So, you know, I think that if you read them through, you can see the progression, but it definitely isn't as obvious. That's for sure.
I think part of the problem is that Percy Jackson is a quest series. Like Harry Potter is, I think, they're mystery books, you know, curled up in a fantasy world, and Percy Jackson is a quest book curled up in a fantasy book, which you see a lot more often. And so, like, there's only so much change, like you're speaking to, Sierra, there's only so much change that can happen during a quest. Like, it's like, I was stubborn at the beginning, and now I'm not so stubborn because people died. Versus Harry, it's like, hey, I was stubborn, and the reason why I'm stubborn is all of these different things, which is wrapped up in this mystery that comes out at the end. And that stubbornness led to actual huge consequences. And that hasn't changed until the next book. Like, Harry's growth is all these different character traits that happen at different times, versus the way Percy Jackson is told. It's sort of like, here's Percy's problem at the beginning, and here's Percy's solution to that problem at the end, which is why it's a younger target audience. But yeah, I think if you're taking Harry in the first 2 books, he's a fairly static character. And in the same way that Percy is a fairly static character. Although I would say Percy does change over the course of the 5 books, like you're saying, with that progression. But Harry, I think, at the end changes more, which is why I think that there's greater depth to that series. I will also say, with the darker tone, you know, obviously we see Harry Potter has like the fallacy of we all fell in love with the characters, so Rowling didn't want to kill off a lot of them, except for Ron, apparently. But so we get all these side characters. We get all these side characters that don't die. It's really, I feel like, just Fred and Lupin and Tonks. It's obviously Sirius, but and Dumbledore. Okay, you know what? Never mind. But
and Dobby.
Okay. We also get a bunch of deaths in
Cedric
Bianca
and Lavender and Colin Creevy.
All right. Well, we don't know about Lavender. Okay, we don't know about Lavender.
We shall stop naming.
We don't know about Lavender still. I will die on this hill. The Pottermore was the one that said she's dead, and then a bunch of people were like, she is, and Pottermore was like, no, actually she's not dead, and then everyone was like, she's not, and then they released a statement being like, we have no idea what happened to Lavender.
And then they were like, oh, by the way, did you know before Blumming? And it was like, we didn't want to know that part, but
I just want to... So I hear this thing all the time with young adult shows or books and stuff, like, oh, like there's death, or oh, look, there's suicide, or anything like that. And to me, and like this will be like, therefore it's for adults. Or adults can enjoy it, and, or it's dark. And for me, I'm like, hey, do y'all remember watching Muppets Treasure Island? Like, there's death in that right off the start, but that doesn't deal with. It's not a dark movie. I think Harry Potter deals with more darker ideas because they actually get into Voldemort's mentality versus it's a little high level to be like the gods and Kronos want to rule the world, and that's really it. Mm-hmm. The only depth that we really get is Luke's whole thing of like, hey, the gods should die. And that is a dark idea.
Right.
So I think, but we never really like step further into that idea in a satisfying way for me anyways. So I also think Harry has to face down the consequences of what's happened a lot more than Percy does. I think it's in book 3 or 4 where Percy's like, man, she had a nightmare. I've had plenty of nightmares. And then moves on. And I'm like, oh, hey, that's some introspection on like Percy has gone through some stuff and maybe he has to deal with that. With Harry has those nightmares about the graveyard. And that's like a whole opening thread of Order of the Phoenix, and then continues on through that book of like, he's dealing with the PTSD, and we get to see what that looks like in a kid. So I think that's one of the reasons why we get depth, is that Harry's dealing with the consequences in a more real way than Percy ever has to.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think also because there's just the way that loss is kind of handled, which is, it's interesting because Percy Jackson is the one from first person. So you would think that you'd get more insight into how Percy feels about losing friends and, you know, letting Nico down, or, you know, any of those, you know, having to leave his mom behind, anything like that. You would think that we'd get a little bit more of those really introspective moments and the emotional impact that these horrible things are having on him, but we don't. You know, it just kind of gets glossed over a little bit. Whereas Harry Potter, which is told from third person, we get so much of that, and we see how each individual loss impacts Harry and other characters. Yeah, which I think is also huge because, you know, we get a little bit of it in Percy, but we don't know how Grover's dealing with, you know,
Pan's loss.
any of the other, you know, side characters who die throughout the series. We don't really get anybody else's view.
It's really just Nico and his sister.
Yeah,
exactly. And it's actually quite interesting because considering that Percy on multiple occasions says, "Oh, demigods often don't get very old."
Right.
So you would assume this would be much more of a thing that they would all like share or talk about, or that would, you know, be something that weighs on their minds, that he was like, oh, there's a prophecy that, you know, by the age of 16 I'll do something either really good or really terrible, and demigods often don't even turn 16. And then, you know, versus in Harry Potter, only Harry has this prophecy of you know, is willing to die for everyone by the age of 17. Versus everyone else in the wizarding world is like, oh, we could be like 100 and it's
cool. I mean, maybe that is a point as to why they don't deal with it, because it's just kind of like common knowledge. It's like, if you're expecting, I guess it's kind of like if you're comparing it to, you know, real life, you know, people live, you know, 60 to 80 years or whatever. And so if someone is within that window and passes away and it's maybe not super unexpected, then maybe the hurt isn't quite as much as, you know, a 25-year-old dying, because it's a little bit more sudden, unexpected. We're not like used to that idea of that particular type of death.
Yeah.
So maybe that's
a good point.
You know, why they don't talk about it as much is just because it's more of like, oh, well, that's just how it goes. But I think that when you're presenting death to younger readers, you do need to tackle it in a not just brush it off type of way. In general, I'm not saying, you know, it's to an author of a book to explain death to children, but, I think that handling it in a way that makes them understand how different people might feel about a scenario is probably helpful.
Probably.
And I think the whole Beckendorf, Selena Beauregard thing tries to do it, but I don't think it's super successful.
Yeah.
Because like Beckendorf dies in front of Percy, and Percy is like upset.
All right.
But then for like a chapter, and then he's like, "Oh, we're having a funeral. Oh, yeah, right. He literally just died 2 days ago. Yeah. I already forgot." And then he's like, "Oh, Selena's still upset." I was like, "Yeah, it's like still within the same week."
Yeah. It's interesting. I think there's quite an avoidance in a lot of young adult literature to avoid emotions, that we just have plot and action and very little introspection or emotions. But I think some of the most powerful young adult literature, Children of Blood and Bone is a great example, allows you to have an emotional response, and that kids should be reading about emotions. They should be seeing how other people deal with emotions so that they can give words to what's going on with them, so that they can be metacognitive and introspective in the same way that the characters do. So I think that there was book 5 to me was the best writing. I think that it was a really great ending to a series, and also that there was more of an attempt to sort of give Percy a 3-dimensional feeling, even in moments where he's like, hey, this guy died, I'm sad. Wait, what? Who died? What funeral? But he has an actual emotional connection with both Rachel and like trying to stop her from becoming the Oracle, and Annabeth, where he's like, yeah, let's make it official, we're now dating. So I think that there is some movement there, but reading about emotions isn't bad, folks. Everyone should be doing that more often.
Yeah, and I think this is especially interesting considering the main difference about Harry and Percy is probably that Harry didn't grow up with his family and was actually mostly raised by bullies until he gets to Hogwarts. And Percy grows up with his loving mom. Yes, there's Gabe or Smelly Gabe for a while in the picture, but then he gets replaced by Paul Blowfist, who seems to be all right. And the few moments we get with Poseidon, he seems all right. So for the most part, you would assume Percy has the better, upbringing and has, partly maybe that is why he's emotionally slightly more mature than Harry, I think. Yeah. Because Harry can be a bit unaware at times.
I think
but Harry also grew up 10 years in like a cupboard.
Yeah. I think the juxtaposition between those characters is quite fun, because Percy is coming from the line of, no, this is how you should act, and I've seen it, and so therefore I'm trying to emulate it. Versus Harry is like, people shouldn't be doing this. It's bad. I've faced it.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get into that in our comparison and
who does it better? I'm kidding.
Characters. I mean, I anticipate you saying that after every single one. I think another kind of point of differences between the two, Percy Jackson series has a cast that is much more diverse. As we kind of know, Rowling has been criticized for lack of diversity and having potentially, caricatures.
Responded very well to that.
I think where Percy Jackson has, lots of different races, religions, sexualities, that even gets much more evident in later books. So stay tuned for those. Magnus Chase, I'm looking at you. I think that's kind of a pro in the Percy Jackson column.
I think also what for me is the, like, it's really nice to have so much more diversity in a series that came out around the same time. There's still stuff that happens in Percy Jackson where I'm like, because there's like some like fat comments and stuff where I'm just like, okay, that's not great. But the difference for me is that people have raised this with Rick, and he was like, oh yes, good. I'll learn from this, and I apologize, I've done it, and I will stop doing stuff like that in future books, which is at least what I've been hearing. Versus every time anyone slightly criticized anything in Harry Potter, J.K. Rowling goes, la 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 la, I'm not listening.
Yeah.
Which I'm like, yeah, but you're not 5. You're like an adult. Like, we know you're not perfect. You could actually accept this and, grow as a person.
Yeah. Point to Rick, point to Percy Jackson. In that frame of mind, though, I think there is one largely problematic thing, which is I think the reason why I didn't read the rest of the books after I read the first Percy Jackson, which was I really couldn't jive with this idea of like, the Greek gods are in the United States because that's where the seat of Western civilization is. And sitting there just feeling like, I had misgivings immediately about that idea that, like, okay, here's the seat of Western civilization. I'm like, hey, do we know how, like, the reason why Western civilization, quote unquote, is in the United States is because of a ton of genocide, and colonialism and all of this sort of stuff. Like, I think it would have been fine to just, hey, the Greek gods have camps everywhere, all over, because they have children all over the world, but maybe they're still in Greece. And so it felt problematic to me because, and almost like a nationalistic patriotism that it doesn't even brush by mentioning the genocide that brought Western society here. And like, sometimes to a lot of folks, Western society can just mean colonialism. So I thought there was sort of a whole conundrum going on there that I felt uncomfortable about.
I fully agree, because part of me was just like, oh, well, this is targeted to Americans, so we're doing, yay, America's the best ever. But I think this goes back to what I just said, where, you know, there is now the whole Rick Riordan Presents, where he, you know, just basically hypes up other authors who then write about their... I actually don't know super detailed about which ones, but I know those exist. So Sierra, maybe you can say more actually.
Yeah, there's a whole lot. Yeah, there's a lot. He basically kind of takes up and coming authors, a lot of them focusing around specific mythologies or legends or other things like that, but from a lot of Eastern countries, so Asia and Africa, and he really boosts. I mean, he's kind of just slaps his name on it, and then it becomes a bestseller, which is really nice for authors who are trying to break in, to have that kind of partnership with him, and then you can have, and then there's a lot more diversity in terms of like all the different myths that you can read about, and he's really pushing for all those to be seen, which is pretty cool. There is a little bit. It's been a minute, and I obviously haven't read the Kane Chronicles yet, but I do believe that there is some explanation as to like basically each subset of gods has staked out an area. So it's not necessarily just because it's the seat of Western, like that
It
is
evolves.
kind of.
That idea evolves.
Yeah,
cool.
Exactly. So, don't let that stop you.
I'm grateful.
And I think it goes back against to, you know, if we look at what happened with Native Americans on Pottermore and, you know, the other magic schools, which are just magic school in their native language. And then we have Hogwarts and stuff like that. That's where I think Rick has listened to criticism and has been like, oh, okay, I can, you know, be this platform for those authors who actually know about this stuff. And I don't have to, you know, pretend I'm perfect or anything. Whereas J.K. Rowling was like, I can write about Native Americans, and turned out she couldn't.
Yeah. It is nice to see that the evolution and change of mindset is possible.
Yeah.
I think one of the major differences, too, is that we've got Percy Jackson, which weaves in the plot of myths into the current world, where Harry Potter, there's this huge sort of separation, takes us out of the world and into fantasy.
Yeah, it's almost like the opposite. Yeah. It's bringing fantasy to you and your situation, and you could see it in the world around you, or it's bringing you, like, kind of lifting you up out of your current situation and whisking you away. So I think that that's interesting. So, I mean, both are valid.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
It reminds me of Kumail Nanjiani's stand-up bit where he's like, I'm reading Harry Potter, and I did transfer schools, but man, it didn't go like that. Harry Potter, it's just like, hey, welcome to this wonderful situation compared to what you were just in, and you're the most famous boy in the world, and you're the biggest sports star, and you've got tons of money. Versus Percy Jackson is like, hey, your dad, he does live, but he's still going to be super absent, and everyone hates your guts.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think for me, it is easier for me to submerge into the world of Harry Potter because I think it is different enough, and it just works more seamlessly because especially with reading the Percy Jackson series, I was like, oh right, the gods exist, because every time they're like, oh, we need to say gods instead of oh god, or like we need to donate part of our food to the gods and stuff like that. I was always like, oh right, it just always took me out a little bit, because it just, I don't know, maybe it was just me, but I just didn't feel as connected to this world that is our world, but the gods exist.
I think that's because there's something inherently religious about the Greek gods mythology, right? And so like you are having to think about Percy Jackson's spiritual nature. So like when he like shoots the man with 3 chests with the bow, and he like has to give a meat offering to Apollo and Artemis afterwards, it's like, oh, that's right, there's like a spiritual part here, versus Harry Potter's very secular, and so it's very easy to drop in and not feel like you have to worship or anything in that way, shape, or form.
And then obviously Cursed Child was like, now saying Dumbledore's name is the same as saying oh god. And I was like, what? Why are we doing that now?
Well, yeah, they take on Dumbledore instead of Merlin, and I'm like, did Witch Weekly write an article about that and it became fashionable? Like, how did this happen in 19 years? Like normally, like Merlin was thousands of years or 1,000 years ago. Like, what the heck?
No, I think maybe it is because I'm very not religious myself, so it feels easier for me to connect. But then obviously there's the whole question of, we still have Easter and Christmas in the Harry Potter world, so why do we have those if we seemingly don't have religion? But yeah, I think that just felt a bit clunky to me in the Percy Jackson series.
Yeah. Fair point.
Shall we actually move to the trios? Because I think we tackled most of this stuff here.
Okay, so we've got trios. Fascinating. It's a fascinating thing. I think that it's really interesting here that we get the same trio for Harry Potter for like all 7 books versus Percy Jackson like can't really pick a trio. Obviously, like Luke can't be in the trio after book 1, but then like I get curious about, from an authorial standpoint, is Rick just like being like, you know what? Annabeth and Tyson didn't really work for me, so let's try a whole new trio. Like, Annabeth really isn't in this one. Tyson isn't in this one. Oh, Grover, maybe not my favorite. Let's bring Annabeth back. Oh, what about Annabeth and Grover? And, like, he just, like, I wonder if it's from a writing standpoint where you're just, like, trying to mix something and he couldn't land on it, or if that was very purposeful.
I think we need to remember that the difference is one of the series is, like, a full school year, so you would have your friend group much more closely, and the other one is, hey, we meet up every year for 2 months in summer, so you would probably not, Percy and Annabeth are like really close the whole way through, and they always do stuff together basically,
except for book 3 where Annabeth is totally missing.
But then with the other characters, they get to jump in, and then it also like goes back to like, it depends on the prophecy and stuff. But I actually quite like this because I think it's one of the slight letdowns in Harry Potter that they are not really open to letting other people into their friendship group as much. Like Ginny could have definitely been a bigger role, for example.
Yeah, for sure.
I do think that from a writing standpoint, the constant changing of cast of Percy's friends focuses the story on Percy having to be really all shapes of the hero, which I don't think that you can like knock that. I think that they're just 2 different forms of storytelling. Percy is really the main guy who's getting help from a different cast of characters, but still is sort of the all-around dude, versus Harry definitely becomes the offensive specialist, and Ron is sort of like the level-headed person, and Hermione is the research-bound person, or not the level-headed person for Ron, but like bringing them back to the ground. And Hermione sort of ends up being, and so you end up specializing, and I really can't fault either way. I just think it's interesting that you get much more focused on Percy, and then, which, like, does circumvent the issues of Hermione is just like the utility belt for Harry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With her beetle bag and everything. No, I agree. Do we want to directly compare?
Yeah.
Sure.
To people?
Let's do that.
Let's do it.
So, main characters, Harry and Percy.
First question. What house is Percy in, and what god is Harry's son to? Go. Percy's a Gryffindor.
Percy's a Gryffindor for sure. Harry. Ooh.
Son of Hades?
I put
maybe.
Zeus in there because his lightning scarf.
Oh my god. Okay.
Honestly, though, you
And
could.
he seems to be good on a broom, and they do the whole thing where Percy's never allowed in the air because Zeus doesn't
True.
like him. So I was like, there could be a bit of that.
I'd agree with you. No, I'm Camp Zeus. That sounds great.
Cool. I'll switch to Zeus.
Yeah, I mean, Harry and Percy have a lot of kind of, general personality traits that are similar. They're both loyal to a fault, always willing to help when it's the morally correct thing to do. They have some physical similarities as well. Black hair, green eyes, black hair both being from their fathers, green eyes specifically being important to whichever parent passed it along to them. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Harry having Lily's eyes is more of an important point. It's mentioned multiple times. Percy having Poseidon's sea green eyes is just really a mark of his parentage. I mean, Zeus's kids have electric blue. Hades' kids have dark eyes. Athena's kids have gray eyes. But it doesn't really impact the story at all or other people's perception of them other than just they kind of know who you belong to. They're both around the same age. They end the series at 17, subject of prophecy and powers that they didn't know they had before the book starts. There's definite differences as well. You had a point that Percy seems much more emotionally aware, which we kind of talked about before.
Yeah. Can I just ask about both of them ending the series at 17? I know partly why we're doing this episode now is because there's a new book coming. But out of the 5 books, Percy's 16 at the end.
Oh, is he 16?
Yeah.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah.
So
Well, then there you go.
Ends basically on his 16th birthday.
Shoot, dang, I got that wrong.
Sierra, did you ever decide who was more reckless?
Oh my goodness. No, I kept bouncing back and forth because I was going, oh, well, Harry does this and Percy does this and Percy just runs into the labyrinth and doesn't have a plan. And but then Harry runs into a labyrinth and doesn't have a plan. And so it really, there was a lot of back and forth. I don't know. I don't have an answer on that one. Did you have an answer?
I did. Harry never goes and dips himself in Achilles' river of impenetrability, so I'm gonna give it to Harry.
River Styx.
I was also going to say, Harry also is like, Malfoy, give back Neville's Remembrall. And then Malfoy's like, no, I'm going to fly. And Harry's like, I've never done this, but I'm going to just...
Yeah. True.
There's a lot of stuff where Harry just jumps into
the literal labyrinth that Harry walks into, he actually has a very good plan. Hermione plans it all out for him. It's the Gringotts that he's like, we don't have a plan.
For 2 months.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who does each other's quest better?
Oh.
Well, the thing is, does Harry do the same quest with magic?
Yeah, let's say you do the
Percy
exact.
have to do the same quest with
you
a
do the
sword?
exact same abilities. You just swap the characters.
Okay. Yeah, well, I jokingly put in here, not sure those Quidditch muscles help with sword fighting. Because I think one of the flaws of the wizarding world is they don't actually have to be physically fit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Really, to do anything.
I think this is...
Whereas I'm pretty sure all those
stairs.
demigods are super fit.
I think...
Oh, yeah, for sure.
For me, it's Harry because Expelliarmus does such wonders. Literally everyone is armed in this story. So he just is disarming people and then stunning them. All right, cool.
Yeah, versus, Percy's very much bringing the knife to the gunfight.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. Hermione versus Annabeth.
What house is Annabeth in, and what Greek god is Hermione the daughter of?
Ravenclaw Athena, duh.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there any other argument for anything
Yep.
else?
Annabeth, Ravenclaw, Hermione, Athena. Great, good. Go ahead, Aurelia, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, they're both very smart and stubborn and excel in everything they
Especially
do,
riddles.
or they set their minds to do, I guess.
Yeah. They also both rely on magical items that contain knowledge. Whether that's, I don't know, lots of different items and books, and they rely on magical artifacts. They end up romantically involved with a member of the original main trio, although which one is the main difference? Sorry, Harmony shippers. They both understand the magical and mythical worlds, really well, but for vastly different reasons. I mean, Hermione learns all that she can as fast as she can when she's introduced to it, but Annabeth has been living in this world from a younger age, and so she's like living it. And so it's kind of a book smarts versus street smarts situation, which is also, Annabeth as being a demigod, they all, have some form of ADHD, dyslexia, and which does not lend itself to being a bookworm. But they both are really intelligent with talent to figuring out puzzles and processing a great deal of information. Hermione is definitely more of a rule follower, obviously, whereas Annabeth is more of a rule breaker. She is more willing to go off and kind of do her own thing and not necessarily follow what other people tell her the rules are.
Yeah. And I think the thing that stands out with Annabeth versus Hermione again is Annabeth seems to have less of a, authority figure need to be followed at all times thing, because she's like, well, a hero is the worst,
right.
so I don't give a shit. And everyone's like, right? She's still married to Zeus. Maybe calm down.
Yeah. Also, Annabeth has more of a penchant to dive into the action versus that is Hermione's weakness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Annabeth likes to have a plan, but she's
totally.
also good with not going in with a plan.
If partnered with the other protagonist, so in this case, if Hermione was partnered with Percy, don't Perks of Wallflower me. I know they're the same actors, but who ends up being the better partner? Does Annabeth serve Harry best, or does Hermione serve Percy best?
Ooh.
I feel like Harry and Annabeth would just
die.
Do so much. They would get into so much
They
trouble.
would get into so much trouble. Yeah.
Can you
I'd
just
give
see
that.
them in the year one in front of Fluffy, and Annabeth would just be like, whatever.
I think I don't know that it makes much difference to Harry. It does for figuring out that it's a basilisk. I feel like he dies in book 2 immediately because he looks in the eyes of the snake and is like, well, oh, I'm dead. But I don't know that it makes much of a difference for books 1 or 3, because I think Annabeth still helps him get through the riddle of the potions that Severus puts out.
Yeah.
I do think that Barty Crouch Jr. has to work a lot harder in book 4 because Harry's such a dunce.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Annabeth is like, I don't know, just kill it. Do you have a sword? But then
I have this friend Percy who's really good with
why don't you
swords.
just summon him? Let's use Accio and just summon him to face the dragon. But then books 5 and 6, I think Annabeth helps and doesn't hinder. And then book 7 is when I'm like, no. Hermione is the MVP of that book.
Yeah. And then vice versa, I think Hermione would be much more like, I'm staying in camp and just figure everything out, and I don't actually go on quests.
Yeah. So maybe Annabeth serves Harry best.
Yeah. Right. So for Ron, it was a bit more tricky because, as we've already pointed out, there's not as much of a tight trio. I went with Grover here because
No.
the first one we have as part of the
No.
trio.
The clear and present comparison is Ron to Tyson.
Why?
Okay, they're both sort of bumbling and then have talents in other areas that show up and are helpful.
And they both like peanut butter?
Totally. Ron is absolutely the bumbling fool that Tyson is, whom I love, but also they don't portray him the greatest in the books.
I was going to say, I think part of that is more movie run than book run, though.
I agree.
Because I think
I'm mainly just trolling Ron.
Yeah. Especially the Ron that, we meet in book 1 where he's really brilliant at chess and all of that. But in general, Ron's role is that he's introducing Harry and sometimes Hermione to how the wizarding world works.
Yeah.
And a lot of more around their customs and stuff. And Grover does a similar job.
Yeah.
Like he finds Percy and then he explains stuff. But as I've already said, I think the big difference is that Grover then gets his own job, his own role, his own things to do, versus Ron just stays with Harry.
Yeah.
Just becomes more and more of the sidekick as the story goes along. Less and less moments to shine.
Yeah. They're also both characters who think kind of poorly of themselves at the beginning. They gradually become more confident. Obviously, Grover comes way more into his own because he gets his own set of, abilities and whatnot.
Panic at the disco. What?
You talking about they both like peanut butter. I'm like, but Ron and Grover are the ones who are always eating. So. Although for different reasons, because Grover eats, trash when he's nervous because he's part goat. So. He's a goat. Whereas Ron just always has a large appetite no matter what. They're definitely different, though, when it comes to their bravery or fearlessness or loyalty. Like, Grover is a lot more loyal than he is brave. And then Ron is definitely more brave in general and a little bit less loyal. Definitely
before Ron, big betrayer.
But both of them overcome, whatever their weaker point is in order to assist their friends. So, they kind of have a similar arc in that they have to overcome, their own personality almost to become more helpful to the cause.
Yeah.
So, what house is Grover in, and what Greek god is Ron the son of?
I think Sierra just basically summed Grover's house up by saying he's more loyal than brave. So I think Hufflepuff is the obvious choice.
Yeah.
I was going to say that too, but mainly just because Grover's clearly smoking tons of marijuana.
I think more like eating it.
Yeah, edibles, that's fine too. Down. Anyway, just chopping on it. He eats grass.
What Greek god is Ron the son of? Oh gosh, that's a hard one.
Yeah, I could see Apollo.
I feel like that's kind of what I was going to say.
The lighthearted
likes the car. Ron's like really into the chariot.
Right. I could see that for sure. I think he'd be son of Apollo, or maybe he just is an unclaimed who ends up in with Hermes.
He could also work as Dionysus.
I was going to say Dionysus or Hera.
Yeah.
I wonder if Ron's love of family makes him a little bit more Hera-like, even though she's kind of a villain in this story. But my real answer is none, because I feel like he's like basically Rachel.
Okay. I can get behind that.
I feel like he's the Muggle in this world. Mm-hmm. Also, who serves each other better? Does Grover serve Harry, or does Ron serve Percy better? I think there's a clear answer here.
Ron and Percy is my answer. But then you have two arachnophobics in a team. I don't know how that'll affect you.
But Ron might be more like, wait. All spiders are just people? Cool. That's fine with me. All right, cool.
Yeah, I'm just trying to imagine Grover at Hogwarts, and I just don't see it.
He's chilling with friends in the forest.
Did you see Grover at potions, though? Like, he'd be like, why are we killing all of these animals to make magical drinks?
Why are you trying to poison Trevor?
Yeah.
I also feel like not to get too dark, but Dumbledore would find a satyr and be like, hey, you should come to my office. And the next thing you know is that Dumbledore's publishing a paper on the 12 use of satyr blood.
Oh, God.
Ooh, I thought you went to, you're almost a centaur. Just go live in the forest.
Yeah.
It would also not be great.
Hey, if you take this path, it will get you to a bunch of giant spiders. So if you really want to die.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
And then we have this, if we extend to a quattro, and there's kind of a argument to be had of who enters the quattro for both Percy
series,
and for Harry. Because, like, we've got Neville, Luna, and Ginny, and then also Tyson or Talia. So, Neville, why don't we start with Neville and Tyson? Your thoughts, Aurelia?
Right. So those ones came to mind because, partly because I know there were plans of Neville joining the trio to become a quattro in the very beginning, and then it didn't happen.
Well, and then it was Dean for a little bit. It was Dean.
Yeah.
Weird.
Wild.
It's great. I would love to have had Dean, but that would have been so different. Yeah.
But, you know, Neville is, like, stopping them in book 1, and then Neville is quite important in book 7 by he kills a Horcrux, and he is actually part of the big resistance at Hogwarts. So, and he joins, he joins them on their, like, trek to the Ministry. So Neville is, like, he could have been, and it's almost like I'm sometimes wonder, like, who does Neville hang out with at Hogwarts? Because
his Mimbulus Mimbletonia and Professor Sprouts.
In his dome, there's like 2 sets of best friends and Neville.
Yeah.
That's so true. Oh my gosh.
So yeah, I think he would have been a great addition, and he clearly had the potential to be a great addition. But then Tyson, on the other hand, actually is much more of an addition to the Percy Jackson friendship, partly because he's Percy's brother. And he similarly seems to struggle at the beginning a little bit with understanding his role and his powers. Same as, Neville isn't great at magic because he doesn't have the right wand, which, thank you, Augusta. But Tyson adapts much quicker to the world, and Tyson is much more like, oh, this is fine. Daddy's gonna save me. I love that he is always like, Daddy. And I was like, oh yeah. And he's like really good at making weapons and stuff. So I think he is a much more reliable part of the friendship group for Percy than Neville gets to be for Harry. But I think Neville would have had the potential to be that part.
Yeah, I think the argument for Luna in comparison to Tyson is just more thematically. They go to her home for help, same as going to Poseidon to try to get Tyson. And then she makes an unexpected reappearance when she's in the dungeon of Malfoy Manor, just as Tyson appears with Poseidon's forces. So I just think from a thematic standpoint, the Luna-Tyson comparison makes sense. But I don't know, like, team chemistry-wise, that she really ends up meshing in as well. Like, obviously, Harry and Luna have a really cute friendship. Ron is still, he kind of almost begrudgingly accepts her, and then Hermione still has, like, her hang-ups because she's just a little too odd and doesn't believe in the facts the same way. So I just don't know. She wouldn't really, like, mesh as well.
Not to get too much into the We Are a Harry Potter podcast, but I do wonder how big of a thorn Luna is in Hermione's side when Hermione is Minister of Magic. I just wonder if Luna is publishing the Quibbler about, like, Hermione Granger, devourer of centaur babies. Like, how big of a thorn is she?
I don't think she'd be that mean. She wouldn't do anything mean. I think it would more be like Hermione Granger going to give rights to Mimbulus Mimbletonias or like things like that. Like, nothing that looks bad on Hermione because Luna really likes her.
Luna's just like, at the last sit-down dinner we had,
Luna would constantly have, like, meetings with the minister to request really weird laws to be passed. And I was like, we just can't do this.
Listen, these mythical creatures need environmental protections.
And Hermione may be like, yeah, I'll get on that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, I think so. For me, the for life clear fourth member is Ginny, right? Because Harry and Ginny end up getting married, so then it becomes a quattro with those two, and I'm sure they go on double dates all the time, etc., etc. And so thinking about who Ginny's counterpart is, I would say Thalia seems like that is the counterpart. Really awesome, sort of shoves everybody aside, knows how to get things done, is ready to move forward, is ready to join the action. Daughter of Zeus, was trapped in a tree, was unable to speak for most of the books, just like Ginny, for the first 3 books or 4 books, was unable to speak to Harry. And I think if you swap them, they end up in similar roles in the story where Thalia is certainly absolutely trying to get better at Reducto, and Ginny is absolutely picking up awesome sword techniques. And so I think that there's a really good argument that Thalia is more important than Tyson, and that Ginny is absolutely more of a fourth member than Neville and Luna. Also, what a sucky way to sort of...
You just like Ginny.
I do. I absolutely love Ginny. Give me a spunky female character and I will just be like, they're my favorite. That one. I think also it just, again, not to get too Harry Potter-y, but it would sync to be Ginny in a little bit in terms of hey, I'm married to Harry Potter and we have our own relationships. But when he gets together with his friends, I have nothing to say because I wasn't there for any of it.
Yeah, that must be actually really weird. And also when you said, I'm sure they go on double dates, it's still Ron and Ginny as siblings. It must be weird for both of them.
Yes.
I don't know. But I could see myself double dating with my brother and whoever he ends up with.
It's just a hangout session with your sibling and their spouse, and it's called a double date. I don't think it's romantic in any way, shape, or form when I say that they're double dating. I don't think Ron's leaning across the table being like, so let's swap. Anywho.
Yeah. It's really telling that we all picked one of the silver trio.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Tyson and Thalia are really the only other options for it.
I think there could have been a moment where Clarice could have been that person, but
after
then
book
in
2,
book 5, she's just grumpy.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm just like, what?
Yeah. And then we've got the mentor. We've got Chiron and Dumbledore, who have some similarities here, Sierra Powell. Nope, damn it. Who have some similarities here, Sierra Obermark. I'm going to do that 18,000 times on this podcast.
Oh my gosh. Sorry. My mom does that to me all the time, actually.
I'm sure she does.
Yeah, so Chiron versus Dumbledore, both bearded magical teachers at the safe learning place, we will call it, who help the main character. They have families that they don't really like to talk a lot about, or at least family members they don't like to talk about. They both keep the secret of the prophecy, or at least part of it, from the main character, although for very different reasons and in very different ways. So,
they also keep key parts of other knowledge from the main character.
Yeah, exactly.
The difference being that Harry never asks questions and Percy's constantly like, why? And Chiron just walks away. And Percy's like, okay. Chiron's like, no, we can't. The plot has to move forward. I was like, okay.
I love this visualization that you've given me of Dumbledore, that every time Harry's like, hey, so why did Voldemort kill my parents? Dumbledore just picks up his robes and starts jogging.
Yeah, well, Harry never really asks, though. Harry asks once, and Dumbledore is like, you're too young. And then Harry's like, well, I'm just going to wait until he talks to me.
starts chewing on the birdie bots. This is earwax. I'm going to put it in my ears so I can't hear you anymore. All right, who wore it better as the mentor, Dumbledore or Chiron? Chiron?
It's Chiron.
What am I saying?
It's Chiron.
Thank you. Dumbledore or Chiron?
I like Dumbledore more. I can't really admittedly they both have flaws, and I think I like that when Chiron shows up in the last in book 5 in Manhattan, and Percy's like, you are a leader, and Chiron is like, no, I'm your teacher, you are the leader. I'm just gonna go and find other people to join this fight. Bye. Whereas Dumbledore is like, no, I'll save the day. Oh, now I'm dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like, okay, I feel like you could have prepared Harry a little bit better, maybe.
A little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd give the edge to Chiron.
You give the edge to Chiron because?
I do give the edge to Chiron. Because of what you said, he allows Percy to be the leader and is a little bit more, gives him a little bit more prep. But obviously Dumbledore is a little bit more hands-on. So, I don't know.
Yeah. I think I'm just too biased. I just like Dumbledore.
Fair enough.
I give the edge to Dumbledore here, mainly because Albus doesn't have fleas, so I might be anti-Centaur.
But then Chiron has a wheelchair.
True. So he's more easily transportable. Then we've got the frenemy, Luke versus Draco.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, actually, before we do that, Dumbledore, what Greek god is he the son of? And Chiron, what house is he in?
Ooh, I could see Chiron and Ravenclaw.
Yeah, I'd go with that. Dumbledore. I can't even think of him being the son of anybody. He just is Dumbledore. Doesn't Harry say
god.
that at
He's
some
the
point? He
13th
just
god.
popped out of the ground fully formed as Dumbledore. Can't even imagine him as a kid.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think just because he's so powerful, he must be one of the main 3.
Yeah.
But then
it doesn't
none of
fit.
them super fit.
Yeah. I'd almost go with
I wonder... That's the Greek god that I was going to choose, but then I was like, maybe he is the son of Kronos instead.
Oh. He is literally just Chiron.
Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, that works.
Okay, so the frenemy.
We've got Draco with kind of 2 different people here. We got Draco versus Luke, and then who we're going to start with, Draco versus Clarice. Your thoughts, Aurelia?
So, I think Clarice is basically, if we compare books 1 and 2 of Harry Potter with like the first 2 books of Percy Jackson, Clarice seems the obvious counterpart to Draco, because she's very much like, oh, my dad hates your dad, and I like you outdid my dad, so I'm just gonna be mean to you. But it's like she just gets much more of a character growth. Like you can easily see as the books progress that she's like, oh, actually, we're still one family, and I'm like, I begrudgingly respect Percy, and I will help him when it comes to it. Minus the part in book 5 where she just, for some whatever reason, is grumpy and it's like, no, I'm not going to join the fight. And I was like, why? But whereas this Draco may have started thinking about it, but we don't actually really see it. Like, I know all those Draco apologists would like me to say that Draco is on the same journey, but we don't super see it. So Draco is much more of, I'm doing what my parents say is right. Oh wait, now we're all in the shit and we're following this megalomaniac. Voldemort. I'm going with Voldemort. And basically only helps Harry in the end, or his family helps Harry in the end, because they're like, think this was the wrong call.
Yeah. And then we have the Battle of the Blondes, Luke versus Draco.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they almost play like opposite roles in the main character's life just at first, because obviously Luke doesn't start out as being on the opposite side. Like, he begins as a friend, he ends as a betrayer, whereas Draco starts closer to an enemy, and then continues to, I mean, he's okay, so they're never, it's not like the opposite, but at first, one starts as a friend and then devolves, whereas the other one starts as an enemy. And then, I guess when you get to around Half-Blood Prince, there's a little bit of sympathy there from Harry towards Draco.
So much so that he
tension.
He tears up Draco's body. He's so much sympathy.
He performed an unknown spell like a dum-dum.
That's why he's more reckless than Percy.
Well, he also just wanted to become Supreme Lord of the Bathroom.
Oh my god.
But both of them end up regretting their turn to the dark.
Well, okay. So first of all, the Percy Jackson Wikipedia, I think it's called, has Luke listed as a Greek hero, which I think he's referred to in like outside of the Percy Jackson 5 books. They like sort of herald him because at the end he does turn, which I'm like, so he begins as a friend and ends as a betrayer, but that also is kind of a hero question mark versus Draco. He's like, you know, starts as the enemy and then like continues to kind of be that, but then is sort of the reason of voice in Cursed Child, maybe. If, I don't know. He's like, hey, don't banish our kids from seeing each other. So that's weird. And then in terms of both regret their turn to the dark side, I'm going to do a who wore it better here. Who did the better turn? Like, who really turned away from the dark side more? And I'm going to go with Draco, because I feel like it's really easy to regret evil once it's actually controlling your body. Like, if Kronos was controlling me and I was like, I really need to pee, but Kronos is monologuing, I'd probably regret my choices instantly too, versus Draco, like, has to make an actual decision that's like, well, I'm still okay, even though my family's like a little bit on the outs, but like we're not going to be murdered or anything. So I think Draco does the better turn.
Yeah, I'd give you that for sure.
I think part of Luke's story can be compared better to Snape's role in Harry Potter.
Yeah, I'd agree.
But Snape's still terrible.
But also, like, Snape's turn is still, like, out of empathy for one other person, right? Like, he wants Lily to stay alive, versus Luke is literally just, it's self-centered. Like, it's literally about himself. Oh, no, I don't know he was going to take over my body. I thought, like, we would do some sort of zombie body. This sucks. Yeah.
I was like, when at the end of the Percy Jackson book, Percy's like, well, he died a hero. I was like, nah.
Yeah, did he?
Yeah. If that's the bar for hero, it's very low.
It's also really easy to die that way. Like, yeah, I have to die by my own hand. Okay.
Yeah, other similarities, both of them, well, similarities and differences. Both of them lead groups of like-minded individuals. However, Luke's army, vastly more dangerous than Draco's little Slytherin posse. And even if you try to argue that, you know, Draco is leading Death Eaters in Half-Blood, still Luke's army. Yeah, that's why I said if you want to argue that. Luke's army still wins out, and he definitely has more like power and control and everything over them, even before it's Kronos, I would argue.
Do you think Kronos ever gave Luke a really weird hug?
No. Because unless he hugs himself.
Well, yeah.
He literally can't. His only body is Luke.
Yeah.
Yeah, my joke didn't really work. I apologize.
I liked it.
Oh, no, it worked. It's just ridiculous. Sierra, tell me about your love interest in these two characters.
Oh, God. Yeah, the other thing they both have in common.
Sierra was probably like, we can jump over this part in the dock.
It's fine. I was already moving down to villains, so... same as my... Hades is my favorite character. I had crushes on both Luke and Draco while reading the books, so that's me. Despite their crappy behavior, and don't at me because I know some of you out there did too. You can't deny it. So
I can, for sure.
I was going to say, me too. I think you just have the two worst people for this conversation. Because we were like, nah.
both in our 30s, like, no, neither of us are interested in these people. I do want to talk about the fact that Luke is 23 when he dies. And Annabeth, who he's been pining after the entire series, is just 16 at the end. And that's way too much of an age gap. It's statutory, and I won't put up for it.
Yeah. I was going to
Cancel
say, I understood it more when it was Annabeth may have a crush, and then she, in the end, says, like, I thought I did, but I think I saw you more as a brother, which I was like, okay, that's cool. But then Luke is like, oh, but, like, I loved you. And I was like, why? You met her when she was 7.
Yeah.
Like, how?
Well, I think
Yeah.
I am not defending the age gap. I will just say that as a younger person, who doesn't understand what love is,
yeah, I get
those
the
can
side
be
of it.
very well. But even Luke's side of like, but I loved you. He's known her since he was little, or since she was little, and like I think that those like brotherly protective feelings can get confused. So I always chalked it up to kind of that sort of thing, and also just. You only have a certain amount of people who are in your group together, and if someone's super cool but they're younger than you, it's kind of like, well. But yeah, the age gap is a little odd. But also, when I read younger books, especially when they're going on crazy adventures and doing things that are like. I would barely consider myself able to do as like a full adult. I usually end up aging everybody up in my head anyway. So I never really think about that.
Yeah. I just didn't realize that he was 23 until I was doing some research, and I was like, that's too old.
I don't know that I ever really put that together either. I always thought he was, I knew he was older, but I didn't think that much older.
Because he's known her for 9 years. So he was 12 when she was 7, which I'm like, okay, cool. Like that, yeah, it's like a middle schooler helping out an elementary school kid.
So that's 21, not 23.
Doesn't really help.
My bad. He was 14. He was 14.
Oh, never
when
mind.
he met her at 7, and
twice her age.
Yeah. So like the fact that love was ever mixed up in there makes me not like Luke more. But he has other qualities of other HP characters.
He does.
Tell me about those, Sierra.
As we kind of talked about, he is a little bit closer to that Snape character, being seduced by, power and promises and all sorts of things, ultimately sacrificing himself to bring down the villain, or in an attempt. But he's also Pettigrew-like, he gives up technically body parts, or his whole body. He's a traitor. He blames his actions on other people. So he kind of has elements of both of those as well.
So to sum up, Luke is an attractive wormtail. Got it. Cool. The villains, Voldemort and Kronos. Aurelia?
I think part of this goes into the core differences between the series, because Voldemort does a lot of the stuff to be like, I need Horcruxes. I need to kill people to make Horcruxes. Whereas, Kronos has eternal life. Like, he doesn't need Horcruxes. And I think we also don't really know that much about, or learn it that much about Kronos, because he's a Greek mythology guy. You can look him up. He is in Greek mythology, and his motivations and everything isn't super important to the Percy Jackson series. Whereas, I've touched upon this earlier, we do a whole Lord Voldemort backstory thing in Half-Blood Prince to understand him better.
Yeah.
And we do the same with Luke, who's not technically the main villain, because Luke on his own can't actually bring down the gods. He needs the Titans.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think those are the only two you can match up against each other. But it's quite interesting to me that the whole thing Voldemort wants to do, Kronos is like, yeah, I got eternal life.
Yeah, I think there's not a whole lot that they're really similar in. Besides, they're not quite whole beings at the start. They're never fully human. They're both skilled at possession, and they both lead large armies, although mostly through convincing other people to be the leaders of, or figureheads, or person in charge, so that they can continue to hide or or whatever the case may be.
When you're saying that, you're I think alluding to Voldemort using the Ministry to still run things even while he's in charge. Okay, because he clearly is leading the Death Eaters.
Basically everything. No. Like literally everything up until basically Battle of Hogwarts. He's kind of operating from the shadows a little bit more. He's like sending other people to do his dirty work.
He's not doing interviews in the Daily Prophet with Rita Skeeter.
Exactly.
Who wore it better?
Being
the main villain, Kronos or Voldemort?
I think Kronos is almost so not interesting. Voldemort has to definitely be the more interesting villain.
Yeah,
I think
because
Kronos is almost just a force. Like a force of nature, where it's like, there's the wind out there. I guess we have to battle that. Versus Voldemort, he is almost like a force in many of it. In terms of like when Harry at that one point is like, it all came back to Voldemort. Like he's a force in that way for so many of the events that are affecting Harry. But he then is also a humanized person with real goals and achievements versus just like, hey, I want to rule the world again.
Mm-hmm.
Then we got these schools. The safe places. Hogwarts versus Camp Half-Blood.
Both of them, as the name would suggest, are safe places away from the dangers that are out there. Kids can hone their skills with a variety of teachers, different specialties. They're a home away from the potentially crappy home for the protagonist, Percy's home being little less crappy and also gets better over time as Gabe gets replaced by Paul. And then there's a forest full of monsters just adjacent to said safe place. So how safe is it really? And there's a popular game that's played there that the protagonist is often very good at, Quidditch versus Capture the Flag. Although there are other games that Percy Jackson series has that Camp Half-Blood has, chariot racing, sword fighting. I guess it really depends on what you consider to be a game though.
Versus Harry's never in the Gobstones Club.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, from like a danger level, I can only reiterate, there's 2 like flying cannonballs in Quidditch.
Yeah.
And everyone's just cool with that. So
who wore it better? Being the safe place. Is Hogwarts safer or is Camp Half-Blood safer?
Ooh. The thing is,
I will say both do have to be specifically, like both are specifically targeted as a place for attack.
I think the thing is, it's almost like the demigods need to be at Camp Half-Blood because monsters can like sense them or smell them or whatever. And there's a protection layer around the camp, so that's where they can safely live and train and stuff. Mm-hmm. But then as we've touched upon, for like 10 months out of the year, they're not at camp, so
yeah,
that doesn't actually seem to make sense to me.
And so, like, do the monsters still smell them and try and go kill them? Yes. So why are we not here all the time? Why is it not just a school?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't really add up. So I would say Hogwarts has to take the win because it's actually, in a world where Harry doesn't go to the school, I think it's probably fairly safe.
Yeah.
And maybe they have a competent headmaster that doesn't, only do the headmastering as a side job to, winning the war against Voldemort.
I'll also say, like, we get the line "no safer place" from Hagrid, who I love, but isn't always the best at, like, really
reliable.
Seeing things. Yeah, sure, we can go with that. And he's also, like, so heavily in Dumbledore's corner, which is a great thing about him. But I think he's truly saying that because Dumbledore's there versus, like, he just like, oh yeah, there are monsters in the forest, but he loves monsters. So he's not really saying that like Gringotts might actually be a safer place for a child than the school with adolescents, magic, and the Acromantula in their backyard.
Guess it also goes back to how do we define safe place? Like if it's just around, is it, easy to protect against attackers from outside? Yeah, maybe Gringotts. is it a good place to raise a child?
No.
No?
Yeah, I guess it's really easy for a small child to fall down a cavern and get eaten by the Ukrainian iron belly.
Yeah.
I'll give the safer place to Hogwarts because they have walls. Like, I guess it's just easier to, like, run behind a wall versus, like, you're just constantly out in the open in the... Like, your cabin's really not going to do much if you just go inside your cabin. Versus running inside the castle, you might be able to actually lose them.
Yeah, Hogwarts is also just bigger.
Also, the gods can just snap their fingers at any point and, like, have all the trees eat the children. So, like, that's not safe.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of gods in the camp... we've got a comparison between the houses and the cabins, houses at Hogwarts and cabins at the camp that everybody gets sorted into or claimed and put into.
Yeah. I think we run in a world right now where it's still 12 cabins. The 5th book obviously ends with we are building new cabins because
for Hades.
That is fixing everything. And all the other...
The minor gods.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So they are actually extending to it, which is probably slightly better than sorting people into 4 things. But then I guess in a school system where, it ultimately breaks down into we need functioning classes in class sizes, dividing people into groups of 4 makes probably better sense. Does it make sense to group people into 4s by claiming these are the main characteristics of those 4 groups?
No.
Probably not. And then I think the biggest similarity between both of them is like the Hermes Hufflepuff connection, where, Hufflepuff is like, okay, you other 3 who were like, I take the brave, I take the wise people, and I take the snakes. I'll take all the rest sort of stuff, versus everyone who's unclaimed ends up in the Hermes cabin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
At least throughout the 5 books. By the end of book 5, clearly they're attempting to no longer do that.
Yeah. And I think the main difference is just those qualities, which could be problematic, versus just circumstances of your birth, which we have absolutely no control over. Obviously, if they both match, maybe that ends up being the same. Think like, basically all Malfoys are Slytherins and basically all Weasleys are Gryffindors. Obviously, there's minor exceptions, but, they have the qualities, but also the birth of their parentage to kind of lead them in that direction anyway.
It is interesting that both systems, like the system that is kind of wrong with the sorting is right. Like Dumbledore says it, like we sort at too early of an age. He says that to Snape about like, oh, maybe you shouldn't have been a Slytherin. Maybe you should have been more brave and chivalrous in Gryffindor. But they both like the Percy Jackson system of like, okay, this is the system of your birth, can subvert the system of like, this is the way we must be, right? Gryffindors are supposed to be brave and chivalrous, and then you get somebody like Neville who the Gryffindors are like, nah, he's not really a Gryffindor. Versus in Percy Jackson, you can have it where it's just like, yeah, I mean, we're all the sons and daughters and children of Ares, but like, that doesn't mean much for us. And instead they go the exact opposite. Like every cabin is sort of like, yeah, man, we have a very solid identity based off of just who our parents is. And that doesn't, it's not healthy for children. Like, it's not a good idea either way. Yeah. Either way you do it. You're boxing kids in, and that's going to cause problems down the line.
Yep.
Especially the whole, like, Ares versus Apollo rivalry, which is why Clarice is there. Like, I'm not joining the fight because you've been mean to me. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, it's all silliness and stupidity.
Yeah.
I have here sorted all 12 gods. Well, all the gods. So I'm gonna run through them real quick, and then you may give me your qualms. Zeus, I put in Gryffindor. Hera, I put in Slytherin. Poseidon, I put in Gryffindor, but also he could be Hufflepuff. Demeter, I put in Hufflepuff. Ares, I put in Gryffindor. Athena, I put in Ravenclaw. Apollo, I put in Hufflepuff. Artemis, I put in Ravenclaw. Hephaestus, I put in Ravenclaw.
Aphrodite.
Aye, Aphrodite again with the song.
Aphrodite, Slytherin, I guess. Hermes and Ravenclaw. Dionysus, clearly a Ravenclaw. And then Hades, Gryffindor? Give me your thoughts.
I think I agree with all those.
I'm not sure I see Hades in Gryffindor.
That's the one
I could see him as a Ravenclaw.
He is clever. Like, he is like a Lockhart Ian clever, except like way smarter than Lockhart. But like, yeah.
Yeah, I'd go Ravenclaw probably.
It is interesting that we have most gods in either Gryffindor or Ravenclaw.
Yeah, there's like no Hufflepuffs.
I mean, Poseidon is basically a surfer dude, so maybe Hufflepuff. But that's just more to do with like a bias of pissing Irvin off. But I could also see Dionysus as a hard worker. Like, it is hard to produce wine in Hufflepuff, but he's also the god of theater. So, like, he's either dramatic and therefore in Gryffindor, or he's very clever about creating plays and in Ravenclaw.
And don't forget, he taught Percy everything.
I'm sorry, but, like, are we really going to argue that Hufflepuff aren't theater kids?
Yeah.
Oh, they're absolutely theater kids. But will they write it? Like, he's the god of theater. He's the creation around creativity. And that
nobody said it had to be good. Every theater kid I know has written something at some point.
Yeah, that's true. I also put Hermes and Ravenclaw, and I know you had the Hufflepuff connection to like, I'll just take the lot. But I have Hermes as a Ravenclaw because he's the god of thieves, and I feel like you have to be really smart in order to be a thief.
See, I could almost see that as Slytherin, though.
Yeah.
Because
that's more like ambitious and wily rather than just wisdom and knowledge.
All right.
Yeah. Because remember, Percy's like, Stoles don't loot anything. And they're like, oh man, we want to. I was like, really? That's your priorities as you go into the biggest battle ever?
So that gives us Aphrodite, Hermes, and Hera as Slytherin. And I think Aphrodite is pretty self-explanatory. She's just super into herself. Hera married the most powerful person in Zeus, even though that's her brother, and does everything to keep herself in that position. So I feel like that speaks to ambition. Hermes, we just remember.
Remember episode 12, we talked about the Black family.
Yeah.
Feels like
Hera, it's Hera Black. That's her last name. So then Hufflepuffs would be Demeter, Apollo, and that's it. Gryffindors would be Zeus, Poseidon, Ares, which is a very clear one. And I feel like all of those make sense. And then Ravenclaws would be...
The more we talk about it, the more I could see Poseidon in Hufflepuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Because especially at the end where like Zeus is like, Poseidon, sit down, we need to have our council. And Poseidon just winks at Percy and then he's like, and then he makes Zeus admit that they would have lost without him. And he's just like very chill about it. Like he's like good at winding his family up and being there for them, but he clearly isn't, like a hot-headed Gryffindor who would have been like, what? You don't tell me I was big part of this battle? Yeah. Like, he almost has a bit more chill Hufflepuff vibes, I think.
All right, so Poseidon is in Hufflepuff with Demeter and Apollo, leaving the Ravenclaws to be Athena, Artemis, Hephaestus, and Dionysus with Hades. So that is the most popular house, is Ravenclaw. Fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Fun. One of the best things about this series, I think, is the integration of mythology into either of them, whether that's the integration of all the research that Rowling did or all the research that Rick did into creating a world that, like, we can all have a touch point in already. A lot of us who've, in both America, Britain, and Europe have studied Greek mythology in some way, or witches and witchcraft in some way. And I think that it lends itself well to having an entry point into these stories.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, Percy Jackson, the Olympians, everything is built into the Greek mythology. The characters are either straight from Greek myth or they're related in some way to an existing myth. Some character names are just changed and their roles remain the same, those types of things. Harry Potter, less obvious on the relation to mythology, does draw from she draws from a variety of sources when writing, and it's not all one set mythology, but I did notice there is a lot of Greek mythology referenced. So I pulled a few interesting ones. Obviously, a lot of naming conventions come from mythology for Rowling, but one example being Hermione is drawn straight from Hermes. You have, as we talked about before, Cerberus and Fluffy, Greek mythology. Phoenixes is Greek myth. Their ability to rise from their own ashes comes from there. The basilisk is almost Medusa-esque, being able to turn to stone or petrify with a look. Hippogriffs are part griffin, which is another Greek mythical creature. I think my favorite one, though, is that Trelawney's mom is named Cassandra. And so she's named after the mythical Trojan princess who was cursed so that no one would believe her predictions, which I find is very apt.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite naming one. And then I think my favorite spell that uses something from Greek myth is the Protean charm. That's what Hermione uses for the coins the DA uses, where Harry changes his and the other ones replicate or transform, which is straight from Proteus, servant of Poseidon, who could transform into any animal or creature, or could turn into any animal or creature and use that to his advantage. So those are interesting ones that I found.
That is really cool. I didn't know a lot of these, so that's
I also love one of the things that you put in here, which is the Hallows, which if I feel like a lot more people are familiar with Greek mythology than they are Arthurian legends, which is why so much like Greek and Egyptian mythology shows up in Harry Potter. But we do get a little bit of Arthurian legend because there is a legend of the Hallows of Britain, and so the Deathly Hallows sort of being with that. That's one of the cool things because there's really awesome English, Scottish, Gaelic, Irish, whatever you want to call it, mythology that Rowling does use occasionally, but the Hallows is a really strong connection that I absolutely love.
Yeah, definitely.
The other thing is that we have film adaptations and we're going to have TV adaptations of both. And it starts out with the same director.
Yeah, for the films.
Chris Columbus directed the first Percy Jackson movie and the first two Harry Potter movies. So, interesting that he wanted to branch into both. I think overall, I don't know how many people would disagree with me on this, but Harry Potter wins in terms of the films. First of all, they actually got all 8 made, not just 2.
Well,
there was also, there's a lot of reason for that. There was a lot of backing from Rowling when it came to the movies. Rick did not back the Percy Jackson movies. I
was going to say he actively trashes them.
Yeah.
Yes, he actively speaks out against them. I think also, while you could argue the faithfulness to the source material, large sections of Harry Potter missing, justice for Dobby, justice for Spew. There's a lot that it had going for it. They had 11-year-olds actually playing 11-year-olds instead of 18 to 26-year-olds playing 12-year-olds. That doesn't work so well. I don't know why they decided to go that way, but yeah, they strayed very far from the source material, especially with Sea of Monsters.
Labor rights.
Probably.
Sorry, really, what were you saying?
I said assuming labor rights because they had to actively change the labor rights in the UK to film the Harry Potter movies.
Yeah.
And even then, the children could only do 4-hour days, which means you take a lot longer to film anything if the children are the main characters. So that is a financial decision, as well as legally we need to do certain things. And if we know anything right now about the big studios, is financially they want to cut corners where they can.
Very true, very true.
Continue, Sierra.
You know, the Percy Jackson films didn't get very good reviews anywhere. They were seen as cheesy, way too far from the source material, particularly Sea of Monsters. The one instance where they saw like I guess, good change is there was a lot of concern over how Annabeth looked in the first movie. So they changed her for the second, the same actress, but they changed her hair and eye color to reflect what she's described as in the books, which will be interesting as it goes into the TV show, because they've completely changed her.
I was going to say, it is such an interesting look back in time, because like in the early aughts, like what our biggest problem was that Daniel Radcliffe didn't have green eyes.
Yeah.
Like seriously, that's where we like had problems, like as if that's anyone's problem.
But yeah,
it just shows that that we've grown as a society, thankfully.
Yeah. They did try to stack the cast with some famous names. Sean Bean was Zeus. Pierce Brosnan was Chiron. Uma Thurman was Medusa. In Percy Jackson, the Lightning Thief. In Sea of Monsters, Stanley Tucci was Dionysus, and Nathan Fillion was Hermes. But it didn't save it. So glad that they're both getting TV series, though, because that's kind of like big hopes for them. Hopefully they can actually really dive into details that book lovers appreciate.
I have to say, in a world where J.K. Rowling is a better person, I agree with that statement. I'm very not super happy about the Harry Potter TV show, because J.K. Rowling is a not great person. But we have more time and to let the story unfold, and don't have to, do a movie where it's like first task, second task, dance, third task. It's like, you just, it doesn't lend itself well to films. So it makes sense that we get a TV show, and I would probably be very excited about this. Well, I'm not even sure I would be very excited about this if J.K. Rowling was a better person, because I think part of the Harry Potter thing that isn't great is the movies aren't that old. A lot of the actors that we had were pretty phenomenal actors, and now we're just getting the same thing with new actors. It feels a bit weird.
Yeah, I hear
Versus
that.
The Percy Jackson thing is like, the movies were terrible. They didn't really tell the story, so I can see why everyone's super excited that is getting a TV show.
Yeah, plus you get some pretty good names going in the Percy Jackson series. They're bringing that whole theme back. Timothy Ogmundson being Hephaestus. Lin-Manuel Miranda is Hermes. Jason Mantzoukas is Dionysus, which is going to be hilarious. And then
Lance Reddick.
God rest his soul, Zeus. So we'll see how that goes. But I mean, they've got some good kind of starting points there.
To go back to Aurelio's point about Rowling's involvement with the upcoming HP show, I would love to see the financial statements. We're never ever going to see this. Like, they will never give anybody this, but I'd love to see the financial statements of exactly how much money she's making off of it, because I, to this day, don't give Rowling money, but I do like to support a lot of the great people who are on these projects, whether it's, the grips and makeup artists who now have a more steady job, or the visual effects and the fact that they're going to keep this very Britain oriented. And so I do like that. And I like the fact that we're going to be able to get, special effects have gone such a long way since just 2011. And so it'll be interesting to see the reimagination of the sets and how the spells work and all of this stuff on a big TV budget. So I am excited about that. It will be weird to not have Alan Rickman as Severus Snape or Maggie Smith as McGonagall. I don't care who they have as Dumbledore because Michael Gambon was fine. It will be interesting to see how they work with, new Harry, new Hermione, new Ron. That'll be really cool. I am excited that Rick Riordan has a writing credit that I did not know about the new Percy Jackson series, and makes me like it much more. I know that like Avatar: The Last Airbender, they've really botched with the movie without having the original guys.
There's a movie? What?
There's not a movie. And they were a part of the Netflix show for a while, and then they left, so we'll see.
There is no Avatar movie in Ba Sing Se.
I think another concern I have is not to say that any of the big studios are good. Yeah. Or, we're having strikes at the moment for a reason. But Warner Brothers seems to be particularly good at not making, quality stuff. Yeah. I have to explain it, I think, a little bit more. But, look at how much the MCU is, maybe minus the last 2 years or so, is being super successful. And you're like, okay, why is Warner Brothers not getting this going with the DC universe? It's seriously the same thing. And you're just, getting it wrong at every turn. And I'm like, yeah, I already don't want to watch the Harry Potter thing as long as J.K. Rowling doesn't apologize. So there's already that's stopping me. But even then, I'm just like, I'm not sure I trust Warner Brothers, because
Warner Brothers seems to get lucky with occasionally getting creative people that can navigate the politics of Warner Brothers. Like Christopher Nolan's first 2 Batman movies are really good, right? Those are 2 excellent things that came out of Warner Brothers. Yeah. And then it's sort of dubious. Gal Gadot's first Wonder Woman movie, really, really good. So hopefully they get one creative head who's able to really guide this series through some troubling waters.
And we can just hope that David Yates is not attached to this.
Oh, or Steve Kloves. Yeah. So that would be nice.
But then on a fan level, I would like to see if we actually get a Snape that's age appropriately cast.
I want everyone to be age appropriate.
Who's not in his 50s, because I think that will seriously change how people view the series. Absolutely. Because I think we just picture Alan Rickman, and Alan Rickman was amazing, but he was
too old,
20 years old. Yeah. So I think that Snape is really not a good teacher thing will come across even more when you see it's a petty 30-year-old.
Well, and I think, so many of us, the original readers, we're in our 30s now. And so to be able to see on a peer level of what Sirius is doing might change a lot of people's perspective on Molly and Sirius arguing. There's just all of these cool things with age appropriateness. Like Tom Felton will be an age appropriate Lucius Malfoy should they choose to cast him. Mm-hmm.
He has said that he would love to do that. I think most of the main cast has said we're good. Daniel Radcliffe specifically has said he won't be a part of it but I think that makes sense. He doesn't want to overshadow any of the new people, with his cameo or anything. I could see as Daniel Radcliffe as a person, though, I could see him being like, just cast me as a random ogre in the side over there. Yeah. And then nobody will ever know. So I could see him doing something like that. But I could 100% get behind Tom Felton being Lucius Malfoy this go around. That could be really fascinating.
I imagine that I don't know about Emma Watson, because as long as J.K. Rowling is involved, I think she will not be touching anything. That seems to be the major qualm between those two. But I imagine that we will see Rupert Grint and Daniel Radcliffe sometime in the 7th book at the very end with the slightest cameo.
Well, I guess we'll see. We have 12 or 13 years before we get to that point.
I was going to say, it also depends whenever the strikes actually.
True.
This is
positively resolved.
Hugely delaying all projects.
I think this is probably going to hurt the Percy Jackson series more because they finished filming the first season, I believe.
1. Yeah.
So as long as the strikes are ongoing, they can't continue with the second series. And, this is a show about children, and those actors are not in a time freeze. They will age. So
Very Stranger Things-esque here, the problem.
Yeah, and then it's a SAG strike from an actor's perspective. So those should be most American actors. Yeah. But the British actors here, for example, can continue work if they're not SAG members.
Which many of them are.
Yeah, exactly. I know because with the Good Omens release of the second series, David and Michael had to stop doing press because they're both SAG actors. But the others could continue doing it.
I'm fully behind the SAG and the Writers Guild as I say this. I do feel for the actors who have already been scouted to play Harry, Hermione, and Ron that will no longer be scouted or considered because they're going to age out as things get delayed.
Yeah.
But moving beyond the upcoming kind of cool future for Percy Jackson and Harry Potter's potential new fans, we've got the final question, the final who wore it better. What is the better book series, Harry Potter or Percy Jackson?
And the Olympians.
I mean, as Sierra rightly pointed out at the very beginning, this is a Harry Potter podcast. So I think we all are very biased going into this conversation. And I think, and I definitely notice this more as I'm growing up anyway, nostalgia plays a huge role. And, we were all we grew up with Harry. So he will always have a special place in our hearts because we have that nostalgia feeling. Mm-hmm. And because I think I've mentioned it before, I didn't watch a lot of movies growing up. I don't know all of those Disney movies that you guys constantly reference. And I'm just like, whatever. And then you guys will tell me, oh, it's so great, you should watch it. And every once in a while I have watched it. And I'm just like, it's just not as great because for you have the nostalgia. Mm-hmm. And I'm watching this as a 30-year-old. And I'm just like, yeah, this is a movie for 60 years old. I've guessed the plot within 2 minutes. And it's just okay. It's a fine movie. It's not as excellent. So I think that is really hard to factor out. Because we have that nostalgia for Potter, and we just, at least Sam and I definitely don't have it for Percy Jackson because we just finished it.
Nostalgia for 3 days ago.
Yeah. So that is hard odds for Percy Jackson to compete against, I think. From and the people who are behind it, I'm very much rooting for Rick because he seems like a chill dude. Yeah. And I'm happy to see that he's helping upcoming authors and that he's branching out in that way. I think that's really cool. But from a story overall, I think I just can't see I just don't think I can not pick Harry. And I think partly it is also because it deals with darker themes and it deals with things that we, 20 years on, we're still talking about it. Mm-hmm. That is just cooler to revisit as an adult in a way.
Yeah, I think
there's my long tirade. I'll stop.
No, I think honestly, trying to be objective, it comes down kind of to a personal preference, how old you are when you're reading them, what you're most interested in, kind of fantasy versus myth. Harry Potter is great to grow with. Obviously, we've talked about Percy Jackson's targeted younger, but if you add in Heroes of Olympus and Trials of Apollo, you can kind of see that same progression that Harry has. But Harry definitely succeeds in being able to represent life lessons and handling tough situations. And while it may, have its challenges with representation, I think that overall, thematically, it's more advanced and more interesting. I will forever be more in love with Harry Potter just because the world is an escape. And I feel more devoted to the characters and their individual stories, something Riordan, he doesn't really dive too much into most characters, like, and their history and their personality and their backstory, besides just who their parent is, and what, therefore what cabin they're in. That being said, mythology has always entranced me. Any chance that I have to dive into that world, I will definitely take. I also think post main series, the world building is handled very differently. Rowling just kind of adds things ad hoc as she feels like it. Whether or not she planned them into the original series, we'll never really know. But, Riordan, he writes, a whole new series, and then he'll tie in the original characters. Kane Chronicles ties in Magnus Chase, if you recognize the last name, that's Annabeth's cousin. Percy and company appear in Heroes of Olympus and in Trials of Apollo, but they're not main characters or point of view. But, I think it just gives it a more fleshed out world building for like the post 5 or 7 original books. But it really comes down to Harry Potter.
Yeah, I'm picking Percy Jackson. No.
Sam.
I'm clearly going to pick Harry Potter. And I think from a personal level, you can already hear in a lot of the comments that I've said, I feel like the original series doesn't have, like, it has a potential to hit the depth of like the discussion of power dynamics in a simple way that children can understand with what Luke is talking about. And it never really nails what I feel like is the crux of the issue of the series. And I think from a writing standpoint, I've also said the first 4 books, I feel like from a sentence level are just not, are the same as the first 2 books from Rowling, and then Azkaban and Goblet of Fire, and then Order of the Phoenix and Half-Blood Prince, which I think is the best written from a sentence level of all the Harry Potter books. I think just overtake it. And I think from a public standpoint, obviously the world has sort of put more money into Harry Potter. And so I think we can see from a voting with your dollar standpoint, Harry Potter has won so far. It's more in the zeitgeist. It continues to be something that studios and people spend their time and money onto. We can see all these different reprints and like the illustrated copies and all of the stuff that's been coming out. That is not to say that the world that Rick Riordan has made doesn't have the possibility to overtake. I think one of the dangers that we're seeing with Harry Potter right now is that I know that there's a reluctance to franchise from Rowling, and that makes sense. You want to be careful with your IP. But if Rick continues to I was about to say roll through and then decided to not say Rick roll. If Rick decides to keep expanding the universe and handing off in universe, if he can hand off to different authors and stuff, I think that can create quite a different, wonderful, diverse, rich franchise within this mythology that he has sort of taken on. And I think Percy Jackson has the potential right now to grow beyond what Potter is, mainly because they're continuing to make new things. We've had such little new from Harry Potter. Cursed Child, which is successful from a play, but not wildly successful among the fan base. And this new Hogwarts Legacy game, which blew the water out of people's projections on how many people would buy and stuff. There's the potential to sort of franchise. And I would love to see Rowling, for various different reasons, including I would like to support different authors within the Harry Potter world. I'd love to see Rowling hand off a bit of like, hey, well, why don't you write within your cultural-based understanding about this world, right? Like, I would love to have a Japanese author write about the Japanese magic school, maybe rename it.
I was going to say,
have that translated
first task, rename it.
Yeah. I would love to see that, right? And I would love to see the franchise grow beyond just sort of rehashing, hey, we've got Harry Potter as the book series and nothing else. Well, obviously we got Fantastic Beasts, but that didn't quite go as far as it was supposed to. So I would love to see.
And once again, I think that was a Warner Brothers bad judgment call of oh, we're gonna...
So many bad judgment calls. The first movie I absolutely love, but like the Johnny Depp controversy and the COVID did not help.
No.
In the success of that franchise. So maybe it'll come back someday. We'll see. But I'd love to see Harry Potter as a franchise move really forward in a luscious way that feels like Rick's Percy Jackson and the Olympians is doing. So I think, in 10 years, 15 years, if things don't really populate out of the Harry Potter franchise, we might find ourselves and kids more heavily invested in the Percy Jackson series. So right now it's Harry Potter. I think it's a better book series compared to this, but will the franchise be better in 15 years? I hope so.
That's a really good point, because I think I can obviously not judge, but from what Sarah said about the other books and how it branches out, if we were to compare everything in the, Riordan verse versus the Rowling verse, I think that would go to Rick. From what I'm hearing from Sierra, I can't obviously actually make a judgment call because I haven't read any of it. But the thing is, that formula that very clearly works so well for Percy Jackson could work really well for Harry Potter if they, if Rowling were okay with stepping aside and letting other people in. Yeah.
What do you think, Sierra? If you had to throw in, objectively, I know that nostalgia and the fact that you and I like Harry Potter have been Harry Potter giant nerds for forever, ever is playing a role here. But if you can sidestep that and you're mixing in everything that has happened within the Riordan verse, what do you think?
I think it has the potential. I just think it's maybe not focused enough. Like because there's so many different mythologies at play when you start branching out. So you get into Roman, which is fun.
Oh, Mars versus Ares.
Which is fun. And we said no spoilers for anything else, so I won't dive into how that works, but it's very interesting. And so not only do you have Greek, but you also have Roman, and you have Norse, and you have Egyptian. So when you bring in all of those, it's just a kind of a lot to handle. I almost feel... this is maybe out of left field, but I almost feel like they should do a Percy Jackson video game series, like almost like an Assassin's Creed, where you have like the full world with the mythology, and you play as Percy going through all these things, figuring out the puzzles and all of that, and and then
God of War, but Percy Jackson.
Kind of like that. But like you could start with Percy, and then you move into Jason, and you move into Magnus and Apollo, because Trials of Apollo, it is from Apollo's perspective.
Cool.
So yeah, I mean, you could almost do something like that, which would be very fascinating. If they did it well, I would buy that in a heartbeat. And I would play that for 100 hours.
I've been told that there's a lot of similarities between Percy Jackson and Kingdom Hearts. I haven't played Kingdom Hearts, I know it that well, but apparently there's a lot of similarities. So it sounds like it could work, because Kingdom Hearts.
I have not thought about Kingdom Hearts is one of my all-time favorite video games, and I see exactly, Sierra, what you're talking about in terms of like, hey, there are these different worlds, basically. And that's exactly what Kingdom Hearts and Square Enix's whole deal is with that game. That's a very neat idea. You bring up an interesting point, Sierra, which is like the focus of the series. And that is, this is kind of tangentially related. The like focus of Harry Potter seems to be, as you read the books, seems to be just, hey, we don't really have a target audience. It's sort of everybody. It's sort of those who are a fan of Harry Potter. And so we get like older writing bases where it's like books 4 through 7, I feel like an adult could pick it up and still potentially really enjoy it. Versus I think it's harder for any aged adult to pick up Percy Jackson and read it and enjoy it. And I think that's one of the reasons why I hand it to Harry Potter. The like, which one's better, is because I have I've been using proclivity a lot, but I have such a proclivity to be like, hey, this is for children, but it's also really good and adults can watch it. Like, that's the reason why I like Empire Strikes Back. That's the reason why I like Iron Man. That's the reason why I think Stranger Things works really well. That's the reason why I think Wednesday was fairly right there, almost. And so I think that's one of the reasons why Harry Potter is a bit more successful too, in terms of the book series.
I'm just very happy that I got most of your references there.
Hey, well done.
Very pleased with myself.
Also, Aurelia, now we need to pitch to Irvin that we do a Good Omens Harry Potter crossover.
I was going to say Good Omens is like my favorite thing ever.
Yes, great. I'm so excited. I just watched the first season of season 2 last night. First episode of season 2 last night. Sierra, are you familiar?
I know what it is, but I have not yet seen.
Okay. I'm going to buy you a copy of the book and send it to Montana. Because you need to read it ASAP. I actually think I have
the book on my shelf.
Yeah.
Okay, so start reading it now. Go get the book. We'll finish the podcast while you read. Okay. I think we've got, put together by our lovely chef, Sierra Obermark, we've got 7 ingredients of today's delicious meal, which is prophecies.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, between the two, there are 7 prophecies. We've got the overarching Harry Potter prophecy about Harry and Voldemort.
Neither can live while the other survives.
We've got Trelawney's second prophecy about...
he will return!
Pettigrew. We have the overarching Percy Jackson and the Olympians prophecy.
Sam?
I have no voice acting for this.
I was like, you set it up so well. I was like, you're going to stop the second one.
I know. I don't know the Percy Jackson one's nearly well enough.
Half-blood of the eldest gods shall reach 16 against all odds. And then we have Percy's prophecy from the first one.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm doing it.
It's all you,
You
Sierra.
shall go west and face the god who has turned. You shall find what was stolen and see it safely returned. You've got Clarissa's from Sea of Monsters. You shall sail the iron ship with warriors of bone. You shall find what you seek and make it your own. Got Zoe's from Titan's Curse. 5 shall go west, the goddess in chains. 1 shall be lost in the land without rain. And then we have Annabeth's from Battle of the Labyrinth.
My favorite.
You shall delve in the darkness of the endless maze. The dead, the traitor, and the lost one raise.
I'm going to say that both of Harry Potter's ones are really quite powerful, especially the first one. And obviously Percy's like, hey, you're going to be 16 and also you might start a big war is a huge through line. But I really love Annabeth's prophecy in the Book of Labyrinth, which is like, is it really even a prophecy at some point? Because it's like, yeah, of course they're going to go into the maze. Thanks. But the, like, you know, having it be about Pan, Luke, and I forget who the other person is, but I just, that one was really strong, and it was a really cool reveal at the end when Annabeth talks to Percy about her prophecy, which is leading us into the next book of like really focusing on Percy's prophecy.
Yep.
Well done finding those 7.
I prophesize it will be tasting very well, this drink.
I like that.
Well done. And then Irvin's going to do Pub's Jukebox.
I don't know if he's doing it or if we're supposed to just do it for him, but...
The entire amazing Lightning Thief musical by Rob Rokicki and Joe Trax.
Trax?
It's spelled T-R-A-C-Z, exclamation point, so who knows. But this is what's on our Pub's Jukebox today. This is what you should go and listen to. So we'll put the wonderful link in the comments. There's some special highlights that Irvin would like you all to know about. Tree on a Hill, which is Grover telling the story of Talia.
Who's Talia? There's a tree on a hill upon Half-Blood Hill that watches over us, silent and still, and no one that can be safe until we can see the tree on the hill. And there on the hill upon Half-Blood Hill, a cold wind blew, dark and I'd been a little bit braver. Maybe if I stayed behind to fight the tree on the hill.
There's another terrible day, which is Mr. D complaining about being camp counselor.
Oh, you're alive. I suppose that's good news for you, but it means a lot more paperwork for me. So don't expect me to be happy to see you. Of course, being alive is temporary. So, maybe if I go away and play pinochle for a few hours, things might improve. For me, not for you. You'd be dead. Where am I? Another terrible day. Mr. Brunner! I can't have You're a horse? Everything's the worst. Just another terrible day. What is happening? You can hate it here, but I hated it first. Just another terrible day. Stuck with these runts in the muck and mud. Another terrible day. Oh, God! I need a drink. Enjoy your stay at Camp Half-Blood.
And there's the campfire song. All the campers complaining about godly parents.
So my dad is some god. That's great, I guess. Did he not want me or not want the stress? Too bad he's the worst, and my life is a mess. Oh no. Oh yeah, Percy. I hope he shows even a trace, 'cause I've got some choice words to throw in his face. Yeah,
All things couldn't be worse when your parents run the universe. All things couldn't be worse.
But I don't care where our parents may be, as long as you are here with me.
We don't care where our parents may be, as long as you are here with me. As long as you are here with me.
Some Patreon news, people. If you would like to buy us the next round, head over at patreon.com/3broomsticks. That's with the number 3 to sign up. We're offering bonus content, chats with the hosts, and on-episode shoutouts to our patrons. We would really appreciate your help in keeping the lights on here at the 3 Broomstick so we can talk about Harry Potter for a long time to come. You can also help by rating and reviewing us. And if you like our show, don't forget to tell your friends. Word of mouth helps us hugely. We always love to see those.
Yes. And you can find us on social media. And immediately I'm reading this. I'm like, is it Twitter? Is it X? Is it Cross? Whatever Elon Musk's latest name for whatever it is. We are on it, as well as Instagram and Facebook. And all of our...
And TikTok.
It's what?
TikTok. I'm on TikTok as the official 3 Broomsticks people.
Oh, you have to let me know the handle, though, because we don't link to that ever.
It's at 3 with the numeral broomsticks.
Okay. Can you put that in the doc later? I'll make sure to
Absolutely.
add that to that. Right. I'm learning new things. We are on TikTok. So you can find us on social media, and all of those are linked in the episode description and on our website. On our website, which is 3broomstickspod.com, with the 3 spelled out, you can find links to anything that we mentioned, for example, music that we always recommend. You can submit a topic of what what you want us to talk about next. Wow, sentences. And most importantly, you can join us in the comments. You can talk to us there. You can let us know what we missed talking about, even though this is a 3-hour episode. Anything that we may have glossed over, anything that you disagree with us, just tell us. We love to see those comments. You are all amazing at commenting, and you have so many cool thoughts. And lastly, we have an email, because that's still the way to owl in the not magical word, and that's 3broomstickspod@gmail.com with the number 3.
Next time we meet at the 3 Broomsticks, we'll be discussing Journeys to Hogwarts. Oh.
September 1st is coming up. Go to Hogwarts, yeah.
And that'll be our recommended song on that podcast. Going to Hogwarts.
Sam's going to do a musical.
Sam's musical, September 1st. Thanks for joining us here. I'm Sierra.
I'm Aureo.
I'm Sam, and thank you for listening. See you next time at the Three Broomsticks. Woo! 1, 2, 3, cheers!
Aphrodite, Aphrodite, Aphrodite. The goddess of love.
Give me big old buckets of butterbeer. Give me big old barrels of butterbeer. Give me the drink I love so dear. And another round for my friend right here of the sweet old butterbeer.
This episode of The Three Broomsticks was edited by Patrick Musilek. The theme song was written and performed by the Faithful Sidekicks. Make sure to check them out at thefaithfulsidekicks.com.
I'm recording, and it is picking up her crying, so this is going to be great.
Well,
Thanks, Patrick.
I can not stress enough how much Irvin sounds like he's standing in the middle of the road in his recording. So
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Patrick will be fine.
Okay, fair enough. I also like how it says in the document, no chewing, typing, or fans, but then...
Yeah. Shall we add babies?
But what I was going to say is every single one that I listen to at some point, Irvin goes, hold on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Click.
I'm like constantly chewing at the beginning of podcasts because they're so early that I don't wake up to have breakfast in time.
Fair
So the first half hour is me like having breakfast while also trying to talk.
Yeah. There's definitely been the occasional episode where we've been recording. Well, we basically always record through like dinner time, and I just get so hungry. I'm just going to have to eat something now.
You want an arrow? I can give you a whole quiver of them if you get this stupid song out of my head.
What song?
Aphrodite, Aphrodite, Aphrodite.
The goddess of love.